powerful psychedelic in the universe. A 5-MeO malt trip by Triptonautical, posted to the Psychonauts subreddit 4 years ago. To preface, this has been by far, unquestionably, the most profound, impactful experience of my existence. And I may ramble when I write this, because I'm still trying to piece together my own existence. I'm also posting this because 5-MeO malt seems to be a very underappreciated substance, and it deserves more visibility. There seem to be very few trip reports about it. I hope this fills a bit of that gap. I sit down with my small bowl of 10 milligrams of 5-MeO malt. I tell my dad, my trip partner, that I'm going to try and vocalise what I experienced to him, which didn't work, of course. I breathe deeply a few times, expecting for a reasonably intense experience. Joke's on me, I'm about to get fucked. I start pulsing my trusty Yokan Evolve, quick pulses repeatedly, as I count in my head. I inhale for about a minute, and by the end, colours are starting to shift and merge in the same way that it did before in my past experiences. I breathe out a large cloud of smoke, thinking, shit, I guess I didn't hold it in long enough. My breathing starts to get heavier and heavier. The merging of oddly shaped colours starts to take over my visual field, but I begin to see patterns within them for a brief moment. This continues to intensify over the next minute. My breathing continues to get harder as things amplify. There were no beings, no objects of any sort. There were some amorphous shapes, but then my vision started to triple, quadruple, and begin to overlap. This has happened in my last trip, so again, it wasn't too unusual, but then it continued. Jesus Christ. After another minute or so, my entire sense of self had disintegrated. This has never happened on any of my DMT trips, only once on 5-MeO DMT. But this was different. Instead of disintegrating into nothing, I felt like I disintegrated into everything, and I was able to experience the existence of my consciousness within this space that I was in, or rather was seeing. No longer was this the usual predominantly visual experience that I have with psychedelics. The visuals were now in the back seat, as whatever thing I was solely trying to make sense of everything. The movements were not frantic like DMT, but slow, calm, and very soothing. The entire experience was quite peaceful, despite my own inner mind trying to catch up. Thoughts stopped at some point, and I just was. I felt like my entire reality, of which I had no sense of me or reality, had melted down into some fundamental base, and my consciousness was experiencing it for what it was. I can only now have vague memories of what anything looked like. I felt like I was experiencing being in its truest form. I'm not sure if this is the universe is everything, I'm the universe kind of thing that I read all over Reddit. I never really understood that from other trip reports, and I tried to find that amidst all the psychedelics I've done. But this seems like the closest I've gotten to any sense of unity. I guess you could say, there was but one. I was one. Welcome back to life. After this moment, which lasted probably a minute or two, I eventually was able to make some visual recollection of the space that I was in to some degree. I somehow managed to speak, which I was completely unable to form sentences prior to this, and everything began slowly settling down back into reality. The entire come down took the better part of an hour though, with the 8 or so minutes after the initial blast. I spent a fair amount of time trying to catch my breath and try to exist again during this period. Previously, I've had my first breakthrough experience with 5-MeO DMT, which was like being cast into a white void of nirvana. It was an absolutely incredible experience. I've broken through on DMT a handful of times, each very unique in its own right, with a never-ending assortment of mind-boggling intricacies. But 5-MeO malt was more akin to the 5-MeO DMT nirvana feeling, except that it had a tremendous amount more content, so to speak. It is very unique in its effects. To be honest, this is kind of what I thought the psychedelic experience would seem like. Throughout my last year of usage, I haven't even come close. Today, it seems like I accidentally catapulted myself right into the bullseye. Postamble. I realise this post is incredibly long, and it may not translate well because of the individual nature of our psychedelic experiences, and the words 5-MeO malt is stronger than DMT may seem like blasphemy, but I've become a true believer. I hope you've enjoyed this. Thank you for reading this far. The too long didn't read edition. 5-MeO malt is not to be taken lightly. Holy fuck. That is the biggest understatement of the century. A 35-gram Amanita muscaria trip report, posted by Eversonic to the Amanita muscaria subreddit 22 days ago. This took place around November 2021, I believe, so some details may be a little fuzzy, but I do remember most things about it. It was around 8:30 PM one night, and I wanted to use some form of psychoactive substance, but wasn't sure what to choose from my stash. I had a bunch of Amanitas that I dried earlier in the week, Muscaria var persichinea, which I'd found locally near my house, and it had been a while since I'd last done any. I decided I was going to try a higher end dose and see what would happen. I scaled out about 35 grams of different size caps. I recommend doing this because caps can vary heavily in concentration despite the sizes, so it's good to use different size caps. I then added the amount, already dried, to some water mixed with lemon juice on the stove, because ibotenic acid converts into muscimol more readily in the presence of an acidic pH. I heated the water until it was boiling, and then turned it down until it was a light simmer. I let it simmer for about an hour, until I ended up with a super concentrated tea. It's important to simmer for a long time, because the heat is important in full conversion, along with the citric acid, of course. I went up to my room and drank the tea. Muscaria tea has a horrible taste. It's like a mixture between wet old socks, rotten tomatoes and cardboard. By far one of the worst tasting entheogens out there. After getting through the tea, I kinda just hung out watching videos until I started noticing its effects. At first, the effects were subtle. Mild drunkenness, but not quite like alcohol or other GABAergics like Z-drugs and benzos. It feels more unique. My vision started getting very blurry, and I felt a little bit nauseous. I was also sweating and salivating a lot because of the muscarine that's in muscaria. The effects slowly started increasing along with the side effects, and I noticed that my room was starting to become unrecognisable and looked very distant. My surroundings felt fake, and the weird visuals starting to overlay my vision seemed more real than my life had ever been. The visuals I was experiencing were very salvia-esque. Out of everything I've ever tried, nothing has ever really come close to the effects of salvia, except Amanitas. The effects are extremely similar, but muscaria is a little different in some ways that I can't really depict easily. My vision almost looked like there was a vignette forming around it. It was grey coloured, and it made it even harder to see and recognise my surroundings. I started seeing various colours folding and twisting in ways very similar to salvia. I also had a similar body height to salvia, and it felt like my body was segments and they were kind of moving slightly, twisting and folding, stretching back out. This feeling was pretty dysphoric, but I remember being so out of it that I didn't even really care at the time. It was around this time during the trip when the nausea kinda took hold over me, and I ended up purging. Amanita muscaria is extremely nauseating in high doses. I've done ayahuasca without purging, except for in high doses, so I wasn't expecting to feel this sick from Amanitas. After throwing up, I felt much better, but still had that dysphoric body high. Eventually, I ended up closing my eyes to see if there was any closed-eye visuals to experience. At first, there weren't really any. After a minute or two, I started to see something that appeared to be unravelling or unfolding in, again, a very Salvia-esque way. It, paired with the unfolding and unravelling body high that I was experiencing, and pretty soon I became the object that was unravelling with my eyes closed. At this point, I had zero awareness of who I was before taking the Amanitas. Complete ego dissolution. I had always been this thing that was unravelling, and I always would be. This thought was anxiety-inducing at first, because I thought I was going to be stuck like this forever. But eventually, I calmed down after accepting my fate. I don't quite know how to describe this, but I was witnessing this from two different perspectives. I was the thing that was unravelling, but at the same time, I was watching it happen from a third-person view from the outside. I was unravelling vertically, and I started to notice various colours the more this went on. Greens, blues, whites, browns, yellows, etc. After what seemed like an eternity, I reached the bottom of the space that I was in while unfolding constantly, and the process immediately started again, but horizontally this time. Same colours, same feelings, etc. This happened for what felt like several lifetimes, until I finally realised what was taking place. I was becoming the Earth. I was watching the Earth itself being created. I realised this because I was unfolding into a sphere shape, and the colours resembled the colours of the Earth. I started to see continents being formed, water, clouds. I was completely amazed by what I was experiencing. After the Earth was formed, this is kind of where I blacked out. I wish that more happened, because becoming the Earth was absolutely insane. But I have no memory of what happened after this. I blacked out and woke up in the morning. At first, I was shocked to be back in my own body, because I'd completely forgotten that I'd even existed. But I quickly adjusted back to being normal again after a bit. I felt extremely refreshed. I was calm and energised for the entire day after the experience. Would I personally recommend trying a dose this high? Absolutely not. This might potentially not be safe. I'm really recommending not to try this. However, for me, the experience was one of the most profound hallucinogenic experiences I've ever been through. I would say it was worth it for me, even though I didn't really gain anything insightful as a result of it. However, it's definitely something that I look back on quite fondly. A 500mg DMT trip report, sent in by a subscriber. As I write this, I'm 26 years old. I'm currently sober from everything, as I am an addict and alcoholic. I admit this freely and feel no shame about it. I do not find I can use drugs or alcohol, or even psychedelics in a way that is conducive or productive. This may change in time, but I'm not in a rush to experiment again. Feel free to share this or not. At the time of the trip report, I was age 19. I will go by M. This experience was my very first ever experience of DMT. It holds a very special place in my heart, while also being difficult to contextualise and integrate. This is my first time writing this at length, so I'll ask you to bear with me. I was 19 years old at the time, and the year was 2016. 2016 was a year of extreme highs and extreme lows for me. I'd just received my first criminal charges for a DUI, where I hit another driver while off my face on vodka and crack cocaine, and had lost my licence for 2 years. This will be somewhat relevant to the story later on. I was quite lost at this point in my life. I lived with roommates in an apartment, and I was pretty poor. I'd just started a new job, my first ever job in an office, that I was beginning to despise with every fibre of my being. I was still young and hopeful, yet I felt at odds with myself and my circumstances, and felt I had a very long ways to go to change things. I really didn't know who I was at this point in my life, and my identity, ego, and self-worth was all tied up in the opinions of others and what I had. I knew even at the time that I had the wrong way of looking at things, but I didn't know how to change. I was still growing up and learning about myself, and still am, like everyone else. But I did think I was a bit special or different. These misunderstandings would soon be crushed by the power of DMT. My experience with drugs at the time was quite a bit. Weed, nitrous, LSD, PCP, DXM, mushrooms, cocaine, crack cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, various M-bombs, ketamine, MDMA, MDA, mescaline. Too many narcotic pharmaceuticals to name, but mostly opioids and benzodiazepines as far as pharmaceuticals went. There are probably many more I'm forgetting, but it really doesn't matter. I was also a blossoming IV user at the time. Not actively during the months surrounding the approximate date of this first DMT trip, but before and after. Moving up to the trip itself, I mentioned that I had just started a new job. During the training and orientation for the new job, I made a friend. We will refer to him as F. F was a hippie type, and I wanted to think that I was too. But looking back on things, I wasn't really. It's not important, but the only thing we really had in common was a massive interest in the Grateful Dead and taking psychedelics. I got to finding out pretty quickly in my conversations with F that he was the man to find if you were looking for high quality classic psychedelics. I had never met a strictly psychedelic connect at this point, especially with different options. I usually only knew someone who could only get LSD or only get mushrooms. We quickly became friends, or he saw another potential buyer. Either way, we liked each other and spent time together and talked often. I would say it was maybe 2 weeks into knowing him that he revealed that he could supply me with DMT. He explained that it was synthesized and extracted from Acacia confusa bark, which at the time I had no idea what that even meant. He explained that it was some of the most potent DMT he had ever sourced, and that it would absolutely blow my mind to smithereens. Perfect, I thought. Exactly what I need. I had researched DMT at length many times leading up to this, and had friends in the past that told me about it. One of the most true statements one of my friends told me about DMT years prior to this was that whatever you think it's going to be like, it's not that. So, a simple deal was made. F said 1 gram would be $100. It said that it did not sell less than 1 gram at a time, which in retrospect was a bit shady. But in my 19-year-old brain, that was great, because I'd have more for the next time. Little did I know how hesitant I would be to smoke it again after this though. He said he would come by after work and drop it off at my apartment, as he didn't have it with him. I agreed and stopped off at an ATM on my way home from work to withdraw the cash. A few hours later, he arrived. I handed him the money and he handed me 1 gram of DMT. I ran back inside to look at it, smell it, and figure out the best way to smoke it. In all of my excitement, I realised that I really did not know how to smoke it on my own. I also didn't want to disclose to my roommates at the time what I was about to embark upon. None of them were tripping people, and I had intended to be alone my first time smoking anyway, as it's recommended, and I did not have anyone I deeply trusted in that way. In my doubts, I sent F a text message, asking questions regarding smoking methods. In addition to his suggestions via text and reading on the DMT Nexus website, I felt I was ill-equipped to correctly smoke it, much less on my own. All I had was a shitty weed pipe I bought from a gas station and a Bic lighter. I had no weed, no herb, or any type of plant material to sandwich it, nor did I have any screens. In conversation with F via text, the conversation eventually led to him inviting me over to his home on the coming Saturday night to smoke it. I believe it was either Wednesday or Thursday. The time and work at the office dragged by endlessly leading up to this. Now, I did not realise, until the day of when the plan was to take place, that he lived 45 minutes away from me. Big deal. However, my licence was suspended, so travelling distances like this proved more difficult than thought. I asked F if I could give him gas money and he would pick me up and take me back, which was a ludicrous ask to begin with, as that would be almost 3 hours of driving for him. He declined, to no surprise. I was committed to going through with this, and I called an Uber to pick me up and take me. I arrived at his house around 7 or 8 PM while the sun was setting. His house was a beach house, a less than 5-minute walk from the beach. It was a messy little bungalow with dogs and people coming in and out. I was off put by the level of activity going on and how messy it was. I had no expectation, but I had hoped that it would be quiet and just me and him. However, this was not the case. I was nervous and jittery, yet F could not be bothered. He was high, smoking dabs back to back and eating a salad. He was in no rush to help me enter hyperspace. I sat on his dirty couch, anxiously fiddling and asking pointless questions about the DMT smoking, many of which I already knew the answer to. When F was finally ready, he sat down beside me and laid a massive weed pipe on the coffee table in front of us. He explained we were going to sandwich it by putting a screen in the bottom of the bowl and putting layers of weed and cigarette ash and DMT. What I did not know, or pay attention to, was how much DMT was going to be put into the pipe. In retrospect, with how much research and reading I did regarding the activity, one might think I would have questioned the amount F put into the bowl. I was so nervous and anxious to just do it, that I didn't. Not even once. By the time it was time to finally smoke it, just about half of the 1 gram bag was inside the bowl, layered between weed and cigarette ash. Before lighting all the goodies up, F stood up and walked over to his stereo. He turned on Divine Moments of Truth by Spongel. I had never heard of Spongel, but after tonight, they would have a lifelong fan. It was turned on full blast, and it made me even more nervous. He sat back down and handed me the pipe. I put it to my lips, and he started to hover the flame over the bowl. I could see the DMT begin to vaporize and almost melt. I exhaled all of the air in my lungs, and began to inhale slowly and deeply. He stopped lighting, and I held it in for about 20 to 30 seconds. When I exhaled, I already began to panic. He said, "Don't panic, take another hit." It was as if all of the air had been sucked out of the room. In F's house, the ceiling was plank wood, and the cracks in the wood began to take on life forms of their own. His dog was sitting directly in front of me, staring into my eyes intently, as if he was there to enjoy the show. Everything jumped into a visceral clarity I had never experienced before. Not even with high-dose liquid LSD taken intravenously that I had experimented with a couple months before this trip. All of this happens within a couple seconds before the second hit. I begin taking my next hit and hold for about another 10 to 20 seconds. I held it in for less time as the fear began to take hold, and I began shaking and my heart was beating out of my chest. Third hit. About 10 to 20 second hold again. I am leaving this world. I close my eyes and see highly complex multifaceted geometry and mandala-like visions. I open my eyes and the patterns are laid over every surface in the room. F somehow manages to get me to hold the pipe to my lips again, and I take a fourth hit. At this point I am so overwhelmed and flabbergasted, I do not even clearly recall taking a fourth hit. By F's testimony, I laid back onto the couch without even consciously exhaling. He said most of it just blew out of my nose while I laid there with my head tilted back against the couch, and my eyes completely closed, motionless. I should preface this by saying I continued tripping for another 40 minutes approximately after the fourth hit. This is by F's account, and I have no reason to believe otherwise, nor is there any way to confirm or deny. After the fourth hit, I don't exist anymore. Nothing ever did. This was always the state of affairs. The best way I could describe this state would be computer consciousness, if that makes sense. No time, no space, no context. Just sounds of blips and bloops, and highly complex geometrical and impossible non-Euclidean shapes. I am moving at light speed, yet completely still. There is no train of thought, or at least for this point of the trip. There are no concepts either. There is no self to assign meaning to anything that was seen. I would describe this possibly as the state of enlightenment or nirvana, as described by Buddhists and Taoists. Everything is nothing. Nothing is everything. I am nowhere and everywhere, and everything and nothing simultaneously. I have become a quark among billions of trillions of other quarks in the universe, completely alone, yet a part of a massive machine with no end or beginning. This state of oneness and ultimate reality goes on for eternity. Probably 10 minutes in Earth time though. As I come out of this state, by no means coming down yet, I am inside a world of tumbling blocks. Highly contrasted blocks of yellows and greens tumbling around in a pattern that hurts my brain to think about. All of the edges of these blocks are soft and round. There is something extremely significant about this part. This tumbling block world is followed by rapid fire imagery. Then the scene changes. I see an endless desert, a tree on fire, an underground magenta circuit board city. This state of rapid fire imagery goes on for another few minutes, or so I imagine. During this state, some small sliver of self begins to resurface. I find myself recognizing the impossible images as they flash, trying to say what they are. I imagine F just heard me muttering gibberish in a slightly excited manner. It's like deja vu on crack. It's on the tip of my tongue. I am certain I've been here before. At some point, I start to transition to the part of the trip where I begin to return to my body, but with full ego loss and full DMT visuals. I'm back in F's living room. The dog is in front of me. As far as I know, it's an alien creature with more than 6 eyes peering into my soul. F is there, and he looks like himself as I knew him. But I was still tripping so hard. I couldn't really remember who he was, or where I was for that matter. Also, my vision is only black and white. I became caught in a loop. I don't even recognise during the loop that I am in a loop. There was only ever that moment. There is no past or present. So there I am. Whatever I am. I had no conception of what a human is. In F's living room with his dog, stuck in a loop. I think I am dead. I am dead. The loop goes like this. I look at F and try to speak. He laughs, says something completely incomprehensible, and I look at his dog. I look at his dog, look around the room, which mostly looks like a melting black and white mess of cartoonish soup. And then I look back at F. I try to speak, and the words come out like or something like this. He says something in an alien language, and then I look back at the dog. This loop goes on for eternity. It is not particularly unpleasant, as at this stage I have no context for anything, pleasant or unpleasant. It just is, and it's always been like this. I imagine this part went on for about 7 to 10 minutes in Earth time. Now we get to the final stage of the trip. What I imagine is the final 10 to 15 minutes of the around 40-minute trip total. At some point I start to come out of the loop. Upon exiting the loop, colour returns to my vision. I'm also able to stand and semi-walk around and move my limbs. I find myself trying to have conversations with F, but not in a loop. They're completely non-English, but I believe I am trying to figure out what is going on and exactly what is happening and what happened to my brain. F finds this particularly funny, as I can remember attempting to communicate with him and he just stood there with a 1,000-tooth monstrous grin, laughing hysterically. I don't believe it was in a mean way, more in a I've been there before sort of way. But either way, I'm in a house I don't recognise, with a hippie that I can't place, in a body I didn't understand. Somehow, this transitions to me and F walking outside. There is a thick rainbow gas in the air, like walking through a rainbow fog. The trees, grass, everything is alive and communicating with me. F has the alien dog on a green rope that is also alive, and we begin walking. Well, F is walking, and I'm barely walking. I was in complete awe of nature, stumbling around alongside him. We walk down his street for a few minutes, and things are generally okay, considering my extreme hallucinogenic state. We got to a cross street, and things take a very bad turn in the trip. I'm standing next to F, and he says something to me. Suddenly, tripping me begins to believe a dangerous paranoid theory. The theory is that F and his alien dog have kidnapped my ass somehow, and that I'm now in hell. I can't leave, and this will never end. Keep in mind, I still can't remember my own name, or much less who F even is. Of course, upon this realization, the only logical option is to punch F in the face to escape this nightmare. This is where things get tricky. In my trip, one version of events happen that don't actually happen, of course. And then, of course, what actually did happen. I'll tell the tripping version first. I punch F in the face with all of my might. I connect, laying him flat on the ground. My fist is covered in glossy, vibrant red blood, and F is out cold. I kneel down on the ground and see a strange aura around his body. Also, near his head and face, I see teeth. At first, it's just a few of what I imagined would be, of course, his teeth. It's not just a little bit of chipped tooth, they are full teeth, as if they were extracted in a dental procedure. Now, the teeth begin to multiply. I stand up from my kneeling position, and I look at the pavement around me. There are hundreds of bloody teeth everywhere. They're everywhere. I can see them on the pavement. As I step back, I hear and feel my shoes crunching on them. Then, I begin to hear the voices. Did you see that? He killed him. Shadowy neighbour figures are standing outside of the neighbouring houses. I don't see actual people there, they are more like silhouettes. But the voices I hear are very real. Then, I begin to see red and blue lights coming from around the corner. Pure panic, like I've never felt before, begins to set in. This is it. I'm going to prison for murder. Despite how hard I was tripping, it's odd. I didn't even know I was tripping. That's how hard I was tripping. But I knew that cops and prison were a thing that was coming. I took off running as fast as I could. I'm not proud of my response, as I really hope if I actually killed someone that I would not run, but I would stay and face the consequences of my actions. Anyway, I'm running as fast as I can, and I take off my shirt. It begins pouring with rain. It is nighttime at this point, and I still have no memory of where I am. This part of the trip is easily the most scared I have ever been in my 19 years of life so far. I'm not sure if the fear and panic I experienced here has been topped as of yet. I'm shirtless, blind tripping, running from imaginary cops down the street. I run and run until I cannot run anymore. I come upon another neighbourhood, a gated one. I run up to the little gate box where the gate person that communicates to the cars entering the community sits. She is a middle-aged white woman, wearing a lot of red lipstick. She is immediately off-put by the soaking wet, 6'3" skinny young adult with massive eyeballs walking up to her. She holds her ground, and I say to her, "I need help. I'm afraid I've lost my mind. Can you call an ambulance and have them take me to a mental hospital, please?" This is what I actually said. She says, "No, I can't do that. You have to go somewhere else." "Please, please, I need help," I beg her. "I do not know who I am or where I am. I've lost my mind." "I'm very sorry. I cannot help you, young man," she says. I walk off in the direction I came from, completely and utterly defeated. I continue walking aimlessly. My faculties, however, slowly begin to return to me as I walk. I get an idea, maybe, that I have something with me so I can figure out who I am and what's going on. Maybe I have something in my pockets, a clue to point me in the right direction, out of this hell. I check my back pockets first. Empty. I check my front pockets, and there's only one thing in my left pocket. A bag with 0.5 gram of DMT in it. The greatest feeling of relief washed over me. I realised I'm on DMT right now. I finally remembered that I smoked DMT earlier tonight. I begin laughing. The best laugh I've ever laughed. I realised I was probably imagining certain things that may not be true. I still believed I either killed or seriously injured a man earlier, however. With my head starting to get into a semi-sober place, I continued walking the way I ran away from the murder. That's when I see F's house. I run directly into the house to find F with a few of his other friends sitting around. Upon entering the house, they all jump out of the chairs and say, "Oh my god, he's back." I look at F and start crying. I run over and hug him and say, "I'm so glad you're alive. I thought I'd killed you." He says, "What? Killed me?" I say, "Yes, I punched you in the face. You've just fucking died. Your teeth were everywhere." F and his friends fall out laughing hysterically. You didn't even make contact," F explains. "You swung the sloppiest, slowest punch I've ever seen. I moved out of the way and you proceeded to freak the fuck out screaming, and then you ran away into the rain out of sight. I had my dog with me and you ran away so fast, I found it pointless to chase you. I figured you would come down at some point and come back." I was shocked to hear this, but relieved. After this revelation, we sat on the front porch and smoked a bunch of weed and cigarettes. I cried tears of joy and love. I couldn't believe the experience I had just had, and I couldn't be happier to be back in my body and right mind. Me and F were friends for years after this, and had a few more trips, and he was my main supplier of all things psychedelic. We lost contact after I got sober and moved to a different state. I will never forget this night and this trip. After this trip, I awoke to many truths. That life implies death. That self implies other. I began to feel my own existence as absolutely fundamental. We are all the fabric of existence itself. We are all interdependent upon each other. I am you, you are me. We are all each other. Faces of God. Nothing is separate, and there are no separate events. We are all in one continuous moment, experiencing each other forever. There is no self. Everything is one. These things have been said, and it can almost be a bit cliché to say them, but after that night, I have never found more comfort and truth in the understanding that we are all one, the universe experiencing itself. Some afterthoughts. I really do not know what F was thinking giving anyone that much DMT, much less for their first trip. I had many DMT trips after this, but none as intense and insane as this one was. A 2000 microgram LSD trip report, posted to the Psychonauts subreddit by IceDog 3 years ago. The time has come. I've been saving 10 200 microgram tabs just for today. I tested the tabs with an Ehrlich Regent and Hoffman Regent test. They were 100% good to go, and so was I. I placed the 10 tabs on my tongue. They were tabs with smiley faces on them. They were very thin compared to past tabs I've had, but the test came back positive, so I thought nothing of it. They were very large, so it was hard to fit all 10 on my tongue, but after I did, I snapped a pic on my phone and went downstairs to sit on my couch. I turn on Family Guy and go on my phone while I wait for it to kick in. A total of 10 minutes pass, and shit is already swirling. I look at my TV and it starts warping in and out. I sit back and enjoy the visuals. About 30 minutes passes me just sitting on my couch. I go up to my room to lay in my bed as the body high was getting very intense. I lay on my bed and stare at the floor. The floor slowly begins to get covered in psychedelic symbols and patterns, until my floor was no longer visible beneath them. I stare into the pattern on my floor and watch as it extends infinitely into nothingness, endlessly. 30 more minutes or so pass, and I want to get out of my bed to get water, but I'm afraid if I step on my floor I will fall through it into another dimension for all of eternity, and never come back. My phone lights up, and I can barely make out that my friend is calling me. I pick up and we chat, and I start giggling uncontrollably. I'm not struggling to verbalise words at this point, and I explain to him that I can't step on my floor because I fall through it. He convinces me that I'll be fine, and tells me to jump with both feet onto the floor. I do so, and to my surprise, I'm on solid ground. I'm actually not falling. I start giggling in relief. I lay on my floor and talk with my friend for a while until I get back on my bed and lay and listen to my friend. He adds another person to the call, and they're at a party. There's too much going on in the call at this point, and I'm afraid my brain will shit itself if I keep listening. I leave the call, and my friend calls me separately. We talk for a little until I can't anymore. The body load is becoming too much, and everything is getting very intense, so I hang up. I stumble to my bathroom, which is right across from my room, and I get over to the toilet and attempt to throw up, but I can't. The nausea is very intense, but I can't vomit, so I get back in my bed. I lay down and decide to turn on music. I lay listening to it, and the euphoria begins to become outrageously intense. A wave of it rushes over me. It feels like a million orgasms. I look at my pants, and I see that I've fucking jizzed myself. I go and take a short shower to clean up. Felt like an eternity. I get back to my room and it's 8:15. I start wondering how that happened to me. What caused me to jizz my pants? And then I wondered who me was. What did me just do? I can't remember. Who is I? What's even happening? My head falls to my pillow and I pass out. There's an orb of light. There's peace and tranquility. Time stops. In fact, time does not exist at all. It's irrelevant. It's an eternity. Something comes and says something. A divine being of some sort. There is nothing actually there, but its presence is noted. It guides the orb of light to a web of thought and memories. Something's memories. Memories of sadness, despair, and locked thoughts. Tragedies locked far away so that they did not have to be remembered. Memories that the memorizer denies. But why are these memories being viewed? What do they mean? The orb then flies away, and so does the divine presence. But if those had left, then what is stuck here observing these memories? There's nothing actually here to view them, and yet they are still being viewed by something. All of the memories, bad and good, flash before the observer. The observer wonders what is being shown. It decides to accept these memories as its own. It takes them and makes them part of what allows it to observe. The memories stop. There is light, and I awake. I look at my hand. What is this? Where am I? I look to the right and stare at an object. An oval that reads 11:22. I stare at it, trying to figure out what it means. What is this object trying to tell me? What message is it trying to get across to me? Then all of a sudden, the oval changes to 11:23. I can't understand why it would change. This must mean something. Why am I seeing this? What am I here to learn? Obviously, the answer must be around here somewhere. Wherever here is. I decide to forget about the oval to my right. It must not mean anything. I see a black object in my hand. I observe the object and find pushables on the side of it. Upon pushing one, a light flashes from it. There is an image and it reads 11:23. I look at the oval, which reads the same. As I stare at the oval, I see the glowing screen change. It now reads 11:24. I look back at the oval, and it reads the same as well. They must be connected. But why are they both displaying this? What could it mean? I stare and watch for what seems like forever, watching them count up. I feel I understand what the objects are showing me. They are counting up to something, but to what? The oval changes to 11:29 next, and I know what will happen. There will be an 11, 2, and blank, and then a random symbol after that. But, to my dismay, that isn't what happens. Instead, the oval changes to 11:30. I cannot comprehend this. I just spent my entire existence trying to figure out how this object works, and I was wrong. I I'd seen the 3 symbol before, though why has it appeared again? I look up and try to figure out what's happening. I decide this object means nothing, and it's just meant to mess with me. So I give up. I crawl out of this thing I'm lying in, and head towards a part of the wall that seems to be of a different material than the rest of the walls. A rectangle with a gold circle halfway down it. I head towards it and examine the gold circle. I remember seeing this in a past existence, perhaps. I grab it. It turns. The rectangle opens as I turn the gold knob and my heart drops. There is more than just this room. Across from me is another one of the rectangles, but this one is already open. I head towards it. In this room, I find an interesting item hanging on the wall. A reflection of sorts. A portal to a world just like the one I'm in. I stare into it and see a being looking at me. Or is that me looking at me? Nah, how could that be? Its body was covered with colourful swirls and psychedelic patterns. I notice writing on my arm and it reads LSD 2000 micrograms. My mind flashes. My memories start roaring back to me as I stare at myself in the mirror and begin piecing my identity back together. My life didn't start when I awoke on my bed next to that clock. I had a whole life before that, and I'm still experiencing that life. After being in my bathroom for an eternity, I finally figured out who I am. What makes me me. What me is. I feel one with all that is around me, and I can understand every object as if it has a consciousness and feelings. Each psychedelic swirl I can relate to and understand. I go back to my room and read the clock. It's 12:47. 6 hours and 47 minutes since I dropped, and I'm still tripping sack. The rest of the trip was very interpersonal and wasn't as mind-blowing as this part, so I won't write about it as this is already super long. I didn't stop tripping until 12 o'clock today, where I started to write this report. This much LSD was insane, and I cannot recommend anyone to ever do this much, but I also can't recommend against it entirely. It was insane, and I'm happy I did it, but I will never do this much again. The Old Man in the Shoe, a Salvia Divinorum trip report, posted at earwid.org April 22nd, 2010, by the user Steve J. Prior to this experience, I'd done quite a bit of reading about the potential effects of salvia, including many first-hand accounts. I had some skepticism that I would encounter the intense effects described in these stories, and thought my own experience might be fairly low grade. I was wrong. This experience occurred on a Friday night, alone in my apartment, about 10:30 PM. I was in a calm and reflective mood, and in what I felt was a good frame of mind for my first encounter with salvia. Since I had no idea what to expect, I prepared my apartment by clearing pathways throughout the place, in case I began to move recklessly. I pushed furniture away from the centre of the room, leaving no obstructions anywhere. I dimmed all the lights, poured myself some iced tea, laid a pen and paper on the table, and put on the first disc of Keith Jarrett's solo piano concert in Bremen, one of my favourite pieces of music. I began to prepare the leaf in a standard wooden cannabis pipe. I sat down at my kitchen table, which was only a few paces from the recliner that I was prepared to sit in once I had smoked. The recliner faced the stereo and speakers, which sat in a cabinet, which will come into play later. The amount in the pipe made me think I would probably have to take 2 hits to consume it, so that was my plan. I took a couple of deep breaths and exhaled the air from my lungs, then used a disposable lighter to fire up the bowl. The smoke was immediately harsher than pot, and of a different character, and as it went to my head, I thought 1 hit will likely do this, and slid the integrated top of the pipe closed. It was sort of difficult to hold in, but I had read you should hold it in for 30 seconds, so I was sort of counting the seconds and rose up from the chair planning to sit in the recliner. At about 20 seconds, I simply released it, and essentially at the same time, broke from any sense of the reality I was in when I took the hit. I was immediately and completely enveloped in an enormous physical struggle with a force that it took me a few seconds to comprehend. It felt as though I was being rolled up against my will inside something comparable to a gigantic sardine tin lid that was being manipulated by this unrecognised force in a physical space that was both within and without my apartment, i.e., I was still aware that I was in the apartment, but also felt as if I was outside in a different location as well. I became aware that there were other entities in this with me, and within seconds conceptualised that rather than a sardine can lid, I was being rolled up in a huge shoe sole that was disconnected from the top of the shoe. I could see in my peripheral vision the hobnails that held the shoe to the sole, and that the roller was the old man who lived in a shoe from the old fairy tale. I know the fairy tale was an old woman, but this was a guy. He was also peripheral in my sight, but I sensed he was dressed sort of like Uncle Sam without the actual American flag adornments. Also with me inside this, rolling up, were apparently the proverbial kids who lived in the shoe, but they were not clearly recognised as such. This was more of an awareness than a direct physical observation that there were actual children there with me, but their presence was undeniable. The shoe sole was not just pliable leather, but was made of a very hard steel-like material that was obviously taking godlike strength to twist and bend in this relentless way. The force was so overpowering that I felt as if I had to fight with all the strength I could summon to resist being destroyed by this action. The children in the shoe who seemed to be laughing at first became terrified, and essentially disappeared behind me in this rolling up process. I turned away from the force and tried to reach my apartment door. Again, only a few paces away from where I was. But I was unable to move in that direction easily. I continued to be aware that I was both in the apartment, but also that another reality and physical space was existing inside the apartment as well. I crumpled to my knees as the force increased, and this is where I felt I had the most intense breakthrough. Any reality I had before was in that moment replaced by the sheer and terrifying certainty that this was not a dream or drug-like experience, but that I had somehow opened a hole in my known reality that allowed a true reality to reveal itself, that showed me how everybody ended up. That this old man in the shoe was the supreme being, who had ultimate control, and this is what he did. If you open the hole, he destroyed everyone by rolling them up, and then, well, what he did, I didn't even know. But I was absolutely certain in that moment that something had happened that was going to destroy me, and I was helpless to stop it. As the rolling progressed, it felt to me as if the very fabric of reality itself was being rolled up behind me and was swallowing me up whole. It occurred to me later that it was kind of like in the old cartoons where everything gets sucked into a hole in the ground. The earth, the trees, the buildings, everything. And then goes pop, and it all disappears into the hole. But in the midst of it, there was no sense of anything cartoonish. I couldn't really think about specific loved ones or anything else. No flashing of my life before my eyes that we all hear about. I could only attempt to deal with the awful reality of what force I had apparently somehow allowed to enter and subvert my reality in physical space. I can honestly say that in the few moments immediately during this realization, that I have never felt such sheer focused panic in my life. I don't panic as a rule, but I have been panicked before when I thought my 4-year-old son had wandered away and disappeared once. Turns out his mother had him, long story. But this was the panic that comes with a knowledge that your entire concept of reality is different from what you thought it was. And that is a panic you cannot describe unless you've experienced it. Period. Of course, all this happened in a very short period of seconds and minutes, and was more of a flash of acknowledgement than a thoughtful process of pondering it out. During the entire time, I was keenly aware of the piano. It became a kind of ostinato that continued repeating a very short segment, and I was wondering where this music was coming from, and how strange it seemed that it was playing while all of this was occurring. I didn't even recognise it as Keith Jarrett, or that I was playing a CD at all. Had this continued on for any period of time, there was no telling where I might have ended up. but I did regain some sense of what had happened. I tried to convince myself that I was indeed in my apartment, and that all the other physical aspects around me were normal and comforting, so that the other terrifying reality I was feeling so intensely could not be real. The final return to reality occurred when I thought that, as the shoe sole was compacting me, and there became less room to maneuver, there was really nowhere else to go, and I acknowledged that therefore this couldn't really be happening after all. And in that moment, the old man in the shoe essentially disappeared. However, I still felt the huge physical force in my entire body, kind of twisting me around as I lay down on the floor at the foot of the recliner and physically contorting me. I have no idea whether I was actually contorting myself in reality or just lying still. I lay flat and closed my eyes, and was hearing voices outside my apartment door from several people, but had no idea if they were even real or not. I rose up and moved around the room, finally sitting in the recliner for a moment and looked at the clock. About 10 or 12 minutes had passed, and I was beginning to feel a lessening of the physical force, but was aware that I was still being twisted in an unusual direction in my seat. I got up and went into the bedroom, laying down there for perhaps 15 minutes. But by this time, the entire experience was melting away. I was being left with an amazed sense of wonder that such a tiny amount of vegetable matter had thrust me into such an incredible place. I lay there for a short while, then got up and went back into the living room, where I immediately noticed that the stereo and TV cabinet had been pushed back about 2 feet at a 45-degree angle from where it was before the experience. This confirmed for me that I'd been locked in a fierce physical battle with an entity right there in my living room only about 30 minutes before. But that was the only sign of a physical struggle. I only wish that I had a video of what it might have looked like during that time. I began thinking that things were only as scary as they seemed, because I resisted the force being applied to me, and that trying this again, I would have to be very clearly relaxed more as the effects take hold, assuming I can, and probably should be sitting as I smoke the salvia, since perhaps the upright posture at the onset had something to do with the forces being applied. Since this was my first time, and that I was slightly skeptical of the intensity I would feel with what I thought was such a small dose, I was completely knocked out of my socks by the magnitude of the experience as it began to occur. As I write this the next morning, I remain pretty shocked by what happened on such a small dose. I'm not normally someone who has lots of fears of a physical nature, but it is interesting that I've joked with friends that my greatest fear in life is to be eaten up by an animal, and that I confront this fear all the time by camping in the wilderness alone. Perhaps this vision was somehow related to that subconscious fear being propelled into the conscious, but my guess is that the vision is somehow more related to the fact that I'm at a place in my life right now in which vast contradictory forces are at work on me, and that the old man in the shoe was a manifestation of the combination of those forces overwhelming me. I admit, it has been at least 15 years and probably more since I took acid, and at the age of 52, maybe I'm just not set up properly for this kind of trip anymore. I've taken many hallucinogens in my life, including LSD, mescaline, mushrooms, etc., and smoked pot for 35 years. But I have never experienced such a break from reality, particularly such an intense visual and physical break, over which I felt I had absolutely no control. The brutish physical force that I felt was being applied to me as the shoe sole continued to be forced over and around me was unlike any I have ever experienced in any setting or physical contest, awake or dreaming. I will definitely do this again, probably without music and even less light, to create a very soothing and placid atmosphere. I may even want to use a sitter, but haven't decided yet. My hat is off to the power of salvia, and I have enormous respect for what it appears to be capable of inducing. I'm not at all certain that I would want to consume more than I did in one sitting, but experience may temper that. I am anxious to see if a more meditative state could be achieved, and undoubtedly knowing myself the way I do, the frightening aspect of last night's trip will lessen in my memory, and I will be returning to salvia soon to see what else it holds in store for me. K-hole trip report of 250 milligrams of ketamine posted to the Psychonaut subreddit by an unknown user 1 year ago. This happened about a year ago. I'm sitting on the edge of my bed with very dim lights on, and have a gram of S-isomerketamine on the table beside me. It is roughly midnight. I weigh out 0.25 grams and split into 3 lines and crush them up as good as I can. This is my third experience of ketamine, and by far the deepest. Once the first line goes up my nose, I wait a couple of minutes and feel myself getting very messed up. My mind is all wonky, and my entire body feels very sensitive and sharp. The texture of my skin is very different, almost like sand. I don't know if I'd call the texture pleasant or uncomfortable. Probably both. I can feel the taste of ketamine dripping back into my throat. It tastes like medicine and the idea of hospitals. I do both of the remaining lines, adding up to about 250 milligrams in total. I try to turn on Spotify while I'm still able to, but I'm not fast enough, and end up with the song Somebody That I Used to Know playing on repeat. I was using headphones at this point. Note: my time perception during the K-hole is extremely messed up, so it felt like a couple minutes and infinitely long simultaneously. I lay back on my huge pillow, basically half sitting as I cover my eyes with a thin blanket. For whatever reason, I quickly squeeze one of my pillows, and it feels like it's made out of sand. A very satisfying squeeze. At this point, I lose control of my body and enter an infinite black void, starting to see 3D geometry appear around me. It's monotone and quite dim. It's not regular psychedelic geometry, but rather composed of weird shapes and angles. I'm being pulled down through my bed, and I start rotating backwards. I do a complete flip and start sliding forward like on a water slide. I can feel my body flying quite fast, and I do a couple flips like you would on a looping roller coaster. My body isn't going forward anymore, but moving in a continuous loop, which started rotating sideways. Imagine a huge hollow sphere sliding around inside of it, and that's what it was like. The spinning calmed down, and I was floating in the void for a couple of seconds, when I start to feel my body getting stretched. I become very elongated, and end up bigger than the entire universe itself. At the time, this all made sense in my head. I thought to myself, so this is what infinity feels like. I'm bigger than infinity. From this point onwards, my internal monologue was almost non-existent. Over the course of a couple seconds, I experienced a sped up vision of my entire drive to IKEA earlier the same day. Colour is present, and I can see the green grass and the blue skies. I'm not sure how, but I end up in a circular room of sorts. It's made of continuous seeping black fog, and I'm floating in the middle of it. I get the feeling that this is happening either very deep down in the Earth's core, or in some sort of devilish afterlife. I don't have a body anymore. It's just my soul floating there. I understand what's going on. There are exactly 8 paths to pick from, and only one leads back to Earth, back to my life. If I picked the wrong one, I would cease to exist. At this point I had no idea that I had even taken a drug, and I legitimately thought I was already dead. I pick one and start floating into it. Darkness ensues me, and my extremely elongated body returns. I feel it wrap around a long conveyor belt suspended in darkness, and my body gets dragged along with it. At first, it drags me deeper down into the void, but it bends and eventually starts bringing me up again. I keep going up as the universe shifts into 2D. I can see myself getting dragged up from a third-person perspective. The song playing becomes very apparent. I can hear every single instrument playing separately, and it's just pure bliss and comfort. The lyrics speak to me, and I understand that it's about me. I enjoy it for a bit until it takes a weird turn. Suddenly it sounds unpleasant, and the harmony of the song is non-existent, just a bunch of sounds mashed together. This part of the experience is quite emotional for me. At some point I eventually open my eyes and remove the blanket. I don't recognise the room I'm in. I get a strong sense of deja vu and memories, but I cannot connect the dots. I have no idea where I am, or what's going on, or what I just experienced, so I start to get scared. What if I die? How will my family react? But then I realise, it's okay. Me and my family will always be together. We are one. I'm sure of it. I just experienced the afterlife, and there was a comforting presence telling me it will all be okay in the end. Even if I die, I will see my family again soon enough. I don't remember too much from after this point, apart from ranting about how precious life is to my closest friend through text messages. I'd already told him I was going to take ketamine, so he was aware of what was going on. I also remember trying to walk around a bit, but I would just fall over and roll to my destination. This is basically all I remember from the experience. It was very fulfilling and gave me purpose the following week. K-holes are otherworldly. I quite literally cannot explain the absurdness of what I experienced, even if it looks like I just did. And the mental aspect of it was even more crazy. Thanks for reading this, if anyone did. I spent 40 minutes reflecting and writing on it. Edit. I don't condone the use of ketamine though. Sure, it might have been healing, but ketamine is also addictive, and I experienced cravings for a while after this. A half-gram ketamine reincarnation trip report, posted by an unknown user to the drug subreddit 10 years ago. Wow. Last night was probably one of the best and worst nights of my life, and definitely one of the weirdest. I have to say, I was not expecting this to happen at all, as the rapid come-up, half of which I'm unable to remember, scared me a lot. With my personality and lack of self-control, I really should have known to make sure that I prepared only what I had planned to snort, as all 500 milligrams sat in front of me at the time of my endeavour. After days of careful researching regarding the correct dose to experience a considerable K-hole, I had originally planned to dose around 225 milligrams in total, spaced into 3 bumps, each 5 minutes apart. Taking into account that I am a fairly large individual, around 225 pounds, I decided that it would be more than enough. I initially remember snorting the first 150 milligram line, which I remember to be very harsh, making my throat instantly feel very dry, giving the impression that I was going to be stuck with a horrible drip for the rest of the high. When I stopped feeling the drip is anybody's guess though, and after about 2 minutes, I vividly remember dosing a further 50 milligram bump as I was coming up, consciously making the decision to no longer redose. Unaware to me though, during the course of the high I had completely cleaned off the ketamine from the case on which I kept the drug, meaning that I had snorted a total of 500 milligrams within the first 5 to 10 minutes, as it only took 5 minutes to come up at such a dose. Once I realised this, I became slightly worried. However, I had very little time to give thought to such a thing, as I was being thrown into the void. At this point, I knew it was going to be one hell of a ride. I had set up music very messily and fast prior to dosing, as I had my headphones plugged into the TV which sat next to me. I found the music to fit perfectly with the drug, and believe it very much benefited the start of the high. It almost felt like the music was my life, and I couldn't do anything without it. It controlled me in a simply ineffable way. As I began my journey into a different reality, I was listening to Schwongel's Museum of Consciousness, which is very suitable for the experience. My whole reality was warping with the music. My movements were robotic, and I had little to no control over myself at all. I was forced to just go with the high and let it control me in any way it felt. The music began getting very psychedelic, as I was vaguely remember sliding left and right with it. My memory is very vivid at this point. All of a sudden, my headphones got pulled out of the TV position next to me, and the music started playing out of the TV itself. I was immediately snapped out of the trance to which I was in, as I unplugged the TV. It must have took me about 30 seconds. I felt as if I had just jumped up 100 meters into the air, only to slowly fall out of the sky, grabbing my heart out of the wall, only to fall back into the bottomless pit of my consciousness, being pulled through my pillow. From the impression I had been given through my research, I had assumed that my body was to be still and numb the entire trip, not moving throughout the high. But the case was very much the opposite. It was as if my body became my mind and consciousness, and my mind became my body. They both moved in complete unity and became one entity. I was cycling through different places and states, as it felt as though I was living about 5 different realities and consciousness at once, all seeming to be a variation of another and slightly different. At one point, it almost seemed impossible to even swallow, and when I tried this, my whole reality just shook, unaware of what I was or what was happening. It all just simply felt like a dream. I eventually gained enough control to reach for the bottle of water that was next to me. Thank you for telling me to bring one, as it made the drip much more comfortable and manageable. It was like the bottle both existed and didn't exist at once. It was there, but it also wasn't. I was living out different realities at once, and honestly, I didn't know which one was real. Additionally, the bottle almost felt sacred. It was like when I carefully unscrewed the eternal bars which kept the contents contained, a huge amount of energy was released, and sent waves of sacred energy resonating around the room. It must have taken me about 5 minutes from grabbing the bottle to me drinking it, as I observed the wonders appearing in front of me falling into yet another consciousness. At this point, I almost got scared. I tried to convince myself that it was simply just a drug. It felt like I'd ruined everything. I'd made a massive mistake, and would become stuck within the endless paradigm for eternity, cycling through what was, what will be, and what I wish was. I honestly didn't know what was real anymore. I didn't know where I was, or even if I was alive. This is where I received an almost life-changing experience. I found out exactly what it was like to be dead. I could live exactly how I wanted to, and live as many imaginary lives as I wanted, and it was completely real. I was reborn and died. The principle of cause and effect in perfect rhythm. But then it came to my mind that I'm simply in my bedroom, and that there was something happening to me. And this truly was an enlightening experience, giving me an insight on how things should be. Although some people had said it, I'd not really considered such a thing at all. At that point, I was violently sick over the side of my bed onto my bedroom floor several times. I'm unsure of whether this is the reason to such an event, but I was told that weed, even if smoked the previous day, can make you sick on ketamine. I had not smoked weed during the high because I didn't want to change the high at all, but I had done that morning, so it was possible that this had contributed towards it. It just came out of nowhere. I didn't understand what was happening to me, but I simply accepted it, as I had no control over myself still at that point, and continued to ride in and out of hyperspace. The whole peak of the high to which I had a lack of control over myself must have lasted just over 2 hours, as I looked at the clock after the sudden decline, returning back to the living world. I was shocked by this, as people had told me of a high lasting of only an hour. However, due to the amount I unintentionally dosed, it is no surprise. When I turned my TV back on, I learnt that I had only been listening to my music for about 11 minutes since I snorted my first line, which amazed me. This was the longest 11 minutes of my life, and half of the conscious high took place in this time as my memory serves, which I understand is not very well, as it is all extremely vivid. From the start of the experience to unplugging the music felt an hour at least, with the whole experience itself lasting an eternity. I'm still unsure of what to think about the truly amazing experience at the moment, but my head is still spinning with things around me not feeling right, with my whole world feeling like a dream and unreal. It is extremely disturbing. It is now the morning after the trip, and I thought that this is to be the first thing I need to do while it is fresh in my memory. I'm aware that this is a long read, and I hope that you gain something from it, or even just find it interesting to read through, but I needed to write this either way. A Candyflip trip report, posted to the LSD subreddit 3 years ago by the user Goldletter. First off, let me say that my drug use at this point in my life was extremely irresponsible. I'd done numerous psychedelics and substances many times leading up to this, and considered myself very experienced. Up until this trip, I had never really had a negative experience with acid or drugs, and as a result, I was being really arrogant with my doses. This is the first time really talking about it in depth since then, because even discussing it can bring up extreme fear and anxiety. I think finally putting my experience into words and sharing it can help me in some way to get over it all. The trip. A dose of 350 micrograms of acid and an unknown amount of MDMA. So about 6 months ago in October, me and my friends were planning to Candyflip at his apartment that night and just overall have a fun experience. They'd never done this combination before, although they had tried each drug separately, and I was there because I wanted to share the experience with them. Before the trip, me and my friend Stephen, using different names, were grabbing some supplies in preparation. We were coming back from my dealer's house with a gram of high quality MDMA and a 10 strip of Gamma Goblin Void Realm tabs, dosed at 105 micrograms each. On the way back, we also picked up a 24 pack of nitrous canisters, as well as some balloons. I was really excited to trip, so we got to his house a little earlier than our other friends arrived and just chilled out for a bit. There were going to be about 6 of us in total, and they were each going to take 1 tab and about a point of MDMA. Once they all arrived, we started taking some gravity bongs to calm our nerves before we trip. A mutual friend named Jordan showed up who I'd just met, and he wanted to trip too. I ended up just giving him MDMA later because he had never tried acid and just wanted to roll. At this point, I decided I was going to take 3.5 tabs of the acid because I thought I could actually handle it. Now, normally this dose would be a walk in the park for me, but the MDMA potentiates it into nightmare fuel. So we'll just take our tabs and wait. We were planning to take the M a couple hours later after the come up. Fast forward about 45 minutes and I'm coming up, hard. I'm seeing patterns on everything. Faces are warped and I just had that general feeling of come up anxiety. We began to play Gang Beasts on the Xbox and take some more gravity bong hits. And after an hour of this, my other friend Jason arrives and I give him a tab. Now that everyone was here, we decide it's time to do the M. I'd realised that I'd left my scale at home and we were all tripping way too hard to go get it, so we just decided to eyeball it and snort it. I asked my friend Matthew, who hasn't taken a tab and was just high from the weed, to cut up the lines as I was tripping way too hard to even do it. He cuts up some decent sized lines for all my friends and they all snort theirs. I tell him to give me a pretty decent sized line and he obliges. Looking back, while my friends probably only snorted 150 milligrams max, I probably inhaled at least 300 milligrams minimum. And this is where the trip takes a turn for the worst. About 5 minutes after taking that line, I began to sweat profusely. It's to be expected, but it was a lot of sweat. I began to feel claustrophobic and generally uncomfortable. The visuals were getting so intense at this point that it was kind of hard to even really make out my friends from the background. My heart is pounding real fast. I freak out and it starts beating faster and faster due to the panic. My whole body is buzzing from the acid and MDMA, and in sync with every beat, the buzzing is radiating from my chest. It's just such an intense feeling that I thought I was literally having a heart attack. At this point, I was having a full-blown panic attack now, and I started telling my friends that I think I was dying. They felt my chest and they said although it was fast, it was nothing really to be concerned about. I started telling them that I was serious and they kept trying to calm me down. I had never in my life experienced that much genuine fear and discomfort. I tried to tell them that I needed to go to a hospital, but they just said that we'd go take a ride to calm my nerves, as Matthew was driving. It was here that I began losing my grip of reality entirely. Me and Jordan went down and sat in the car and waited for them to find the keys to come down. Keep in mind that this dude was not experienced in handling people tripping, and I had just met him that day. I convinced myself that I was dead. Through a series of thought loops that he unknowingly propagated, there was a point where I was just asking him if I was dead and in the afterlife, and I think he misunderstood me because he replied with yes. I got out of the car and started pacing around, murmuring to myself about being dead. My friends were coming down because Jordan wanted to go ask for the help, and I was basically screaming out the mantra, "I'm dead! I'm dead!" They reassured me that I was not dead, but could not convince me at all. We started driving towards the levee banks to go take a walk. Now, I've had ego death before, but for some reason the panic and fear had stayed with me throughout the experience, so it turned from a beautiful experience to a horrifying nightmare. I would lose track of all my thoughts and what I was doing at the time. I remember trying to scroll through my contacts to see my mum's number. I wasn't going to actually call her, but just to ground myself from reality, I looked at her number. But every time I looked down at my phone, I forgot what I was doing, and my mind had reset. And then, the panic would set in again. This would loop on for a while now. We finally started walking to the levee, and I managed to completely lose reality. I was utterly convinced that I'd had a heart attack and died, and that everyone with me were deities or angels guiding me to the afterlife. I thought they were judging me for my sins. The visuals were all engulfing at this point, and my friends looked like otherworldly beings. I asked one of my friends what I'd done to cause all this. He misinterpreted and started listing out all the drugs I had taken, as well as what I did that day, which began to make my panic start to spiral again. I began to ask if I could reach out to my mum and family before I moved on, and they kept saying that I'm not talking to my family right now at all. I truly thought that my mum would get a phone call saying that I was dead, and I would never speak to them again. Then, it was night at the time. I began kind of just walking very slowly, and my vision began stretching out away from the people and towards the darkness. It was as if my consciousness was receding from visual stimuli until it became a singular, minuscule point in my vision. They managed to get me into the car, but at this point it was like a full DMT trip. I heard a voice that was telling me that the afterlife wasn't that bad at all. And then this light began to emerge. The best I can do to describe these visuals that came out was a bunch of humanoid light figures holding hands and dancing to a tune. Might have been the music they were playing at the time, but I couldn't tell. I was absorbed into the visuals and became one with everything. I was no thoughts, and had no worries and no memories, just another cog in the stream of the universal consciousness. It took me an hour and a half to start to come back. My friend showed me this video on the way home to try and calm me. I accepted this as a reality, but it did indeed calm me. I was talking to him and viewed him as a god of a universe who was equal to me. I thought I was going to be reborn again in a few minutes. We went back into the room and they started hitting the nitrous balloons and more gas. I hit a balloon of nitrous and it was like I was smacked back into reality. All of my memories and everything returned to me in an instant, like it never even happened. It was about 2 AM when this went down, and after calming down, we smoked all night until I got dropped off the next morning. Although not immediately afterwards, this trip has caused some long-lasting trauma. I have extreme general anxiety and panic attacks now, as well as depersonalization or derealization. It is getting better with time, but anytime my heart rate increases slightly, or I feel a slight change of consciousness, my fear of losing it again sets in, and I panicked hard. Even though I suffer from these panic attacks now, the trip has definitely taught me lessons after meditation and reflections. I was addicted to Xanax and other drugs, and what I went through during the trip could have definitely been a reality. It was a lot of work getting off benzos, but I quit cold turkey about a month ago and haven't touched one since. I now truly value the conversations and time spent with my family, and have a higher regard for life. Apologies for the long post, but I've been meaning to get this off my chest for a while now, so I just wanted to thank you for reading. Into the Abyss on 4ACO DMT. A trip report by Lilfoot, posted to earwid.org August 27th, 2010. Day 1. It began one morning when a friend and I were on our way back from a party the night before. I had a milligram scale and a fresh bag full of 500 milligrams of 4ACO DMT, that I was waiting to crack into once we got home. My previous drug experiences include 4-ACO-DMT itself, as well as most of the 2C series, LSD, mushrooms, AMT, DMT, DPT, 5-MeO-DALT, MDMA repeatedly to the point of exhaustion, and ketamine, PCP, marijuana, and the usual dissociatives, as well as a handful of opiates, benzos, and other pharmies. But none of them, aside from DPT perhaps, prepared me for this experience that I'm going to talk about. About 10 minutes from home, we heard a siren and saw lights flashing in our rear view. My friend, let's call him John, has zero experience as far as dealing with law enforcement officers, so he becomes instantly nervous. I had the bag of 4-ACO-DMT in my wallet and the milligram scale beneath my seat. We pulled over, and after telling us that his inspection sticker was out of date, the cop asked John to step out of the vehicle. A couple minutes later, he came back and informed me that John was acting sketchy and was refusing to talk to him or answer any questions at all. He told me that as a result of my friend's actions, or inactions really, they were going to call a K9 unit, and that I should sit tight where I was. In total fight-or-flight mode, I realised that I sure as hell didn't want to go to jail, and even if 4-ACO-DMT is technically legal at this point in time, I didn't want to take any chances. So in one quick, throat-scraping motion, I swallowed the entire Ziploc baggie full of this very potent tryptamine. We waited and waited and waited for the K9 unit to appear. And the entire time I sat on the curb wondering if I was about to start blowing up right here in front of half of my local PD and just start freaking out on all this stuff. Fortunately, the K9 unit came and went, alerting on nothing, so we were free to go. Immediately, once I re-entered the car, I told John that I needed to puke right now. He didn't believe me when I told him I swallowed the bag at first, but after I informed him of just how serious the situation was, we raced to the closest Kroger, where I spent close to 30 minutes blowing hot bile out my nose just trying to get the bag to come up. No dice. I met my friend outside and told him we needed to get to the ER, and fast. I still wasn't tripping, so I was thankful for that much. But the nurses in the ER basically gave me 2 cups of charcoal and told me there wasn't jack shit they could do, but that I'd most likely pass the bag whole. I took the word for it and went home. Day 2. Summer Slaughter, a big death metal show that was in town at the time. I was super pumped and was tagging along with my other friend, let's call him James. It was fairly uneventful. I noticed that I had yet to pass the bag, but after smoking a blunt in the crowd, I noticed that I felt a little bit more than just stoned. My stomach was in some sort of intense pain, but I shrugged it off and tried to just stay focused on the music. Towards the end of the night, I ended up just sitting on the ground, waiting for it all to be over. I was so incredibly confused, but still thought it was just because I hadn't smoked that much good bud in a long time. We left eventually, and I felt better on the ride home, if not still a little bit foggy. I slammed through a Steel Reserve, Black Label of course, at James's, before I had to ride back to my place. I was feeling very tired and strange, although still not enough for me to suspect the bag had leaked. I told all my friends the story, and they all agreed that it would be pretty gross if I still tried to move any of the chemical once it was released from my body, and we laughed about it all, and I went home. That night, as I lay in bed ready to fall asleep, my thoughts were getting deeper and deeper. I still had no suspicions that it was anything but a heavy drunkenness and being completely pooped from the long day. Day 3. I woke up repeatedly throughout the night, passing in and out of the strangest, most vivid dream I have ever had. It involved multiple levels of lucid dreaming, an insane sex frenzy, as well as time control, reptilian consciousness, and plenty of other super weird, ultra psychedelic stuff. I may actually attempt very low dosages of 4-ACO-DMT before bedtime someday, as this was perhaps one of the most interesting parts of the entire experience. When I woke up for good, my body felt light and airy, and it was difficult to read. I figured it was just because my dream was so weird that I was somehow still not totally awake. But the longer I was up, the odder I felt. A friend came over, and I couldn't recognize his face after even an hour of talking, and still had no idea who he was until my sister said his name. I floated through my house, gradually going deeper and deeper into a state of pure oddness. I wondered multiple times if, due to the multi-layered nature of my dream, I was still maybe just dreaming, since it didn't feel much different from a dream at all. And then, about halfway through the day, I felt myself slowly rising in an unmistakable fashion. That's when I knew what had happened. In my last few sober moments, I hopped onto a well-known harm reduction forum that spent quite a bit of time lurking on, and posted my first thread ever, asking whether or not I should go to the ER. Even though I knew how potentially life-threatening the situation could be, I was experiencing huge rushes of euphoria, where I couldn't help but burst out laughing. Things began to wave and churn in my vision, and come unhinged at the edges. In the last wave of near sobriety, before things really began to start shifting, I called my girlfriend and told her to please come pick me up and help me get to the hospital. She had to be at work, but she promised me that her older sister would be there soon to help me out. But this is where things get a little fuzzy. I remember laying in bed, with thousands of feelings beginning to wash over me, each one begging for attention, like my mind was being tugged at from every direction possible. The pull became harder with every passing moment, and walking got a lot harder. In a move that surprised even me, I turned off all the lights in my house, put on some clean clothes, and put water and dog food in my dog's bowl before kissing him goodbye. A part of me, even with as far gone as I was already, understood very well that this might be the last time I would ever get to do these daily routines I once thought of as minor annoyances. I felt calm and at peace, even as my sense of self was beginning to dissolve completely. I vaguely remember my girlfriend's sister, let's call her Sarah, helping me outside and into her car. I remember feeling like we were moving very fast on the way to the ER, and once we got there, it was nearly impossible for me to communicate. I told the triage that I had a bag of drugs that might hurt me inside of me, and it was opening up. She told me to fill out some forms, which just looked like ancient hieroglyphs to me. Sarah obviously realised that this was impossible, and asked the nurse to please see me now while she tried to fill them out, which she obliged to. At this point for me, the walls were turning into portals and three-dimensional spirals were popping out of them towards me from every direction. The next thing I remember is having my blood pressure checked, and then sitting on a bed in a room that looked and felt like it was entirely outside. The floor was grass, and I could even feel it. After this point, I must have laid down, because the rest is completely impossible for me to describe. There was no entity contact, there was no living millions of lives that you hear on psychedelics. There was just simply me sitting in the light of God, and then becoming it. I experienced many very personal visions that I have no wish to include here for a variety of reasons, but every single one of them shook me to the core, and it still does when I remember them. I experienced becoming old and becoming young and becoming old again, and throughout it all, I was never scared or anxious for a single moment. In fact, it felt like coming home, like the most intense and prolonged deja vu you could ever imagine. I had seen and done everything here before, as I would again and again and again, for all of eternity. It was simply the act of doing at its simplest. Every action the same action, every intention the same intention, every outcome the same outcome. It was completely beautiful. And, to top it off, I survived. According to Sarah, my blood pressure was fine, as well as my pulse, which was a little fast, but I was breathing normally. And she said at some points I even began breathing in through my nose and out from my mouth, which I thought was really interesting. Apparently I just laid there with my eyes closed, almost completely unresponsive. I don't know how long it took me to come down from that place, but when I did, it happened instantly. And suddenly, I was sober again. Completely. They released me, and prescribed me a huge jug of something that's supposed to make me shit a lot to try and clean out my guts. I smoked a cigarette, and we picked up my prescription from the drugstore, where I felt entirely normal. Although, Sarah later informed me that I was being a total creep. Something I don't actually doubt. I had her drop me off at a friend's house, where I recovered some more before he took me home that night. And at that point, I was much closer to normal everyday thinking, although still a little off. Well, more than a little, I guess. I posted some about my experience and popped 2 Benadryls and just passed out cold with my puppy on my chest. Day 4, present time. Heavy afterglow, visual effects still persisting. I catch myself in some thought loops here and there, and still sometimes have glimmers of synesthesia. My thinking has tended towards the mystical, to say the least. A medium-dose 5-MeO adult trip and a low-dose MDMA trip have helped me to reintegrate some of the experience that I went through. I have a newfound appreciation for sobriety, and have decided to begin a new diet and exercise regime, in light of how much I found myself missing my body when I became detached from it. In a way, I realised how much I'd hated my body before the experience, and how much I value it now. Not in a vain way, but in that it's mine and will always be mine, and I need to take pride in it. I've begun reintroducing myself to all the people I am closest with in my life, and I'm loving every second of it. Let me get this straight though, I am in no way advocating taking this huge of a dose. I had a positive experience despite everything, but I think that I may have only ingested half of the actual dose I took, possibly even less due to charcoal absorption, as well as destruction by heat, acid moisture, and a rapid tolerance climb from the time it leaked, which I'm now guessing was sometime during day 2. I doubt I will ever take anything over 50 milligrams again, if even that. A fun night that spiralled into insanity. A trip report sent in by a subscriber on 11th of November 2022. Yeah, sorry, I didn't get around to it faster, mate, but here we go. To begin my story, I vaguely remember around halfway through December of 2021 is when I decided to take my first trip. I just turned 20 and never had the chance to have psychedelics till then. Little did I know, this would be my last time travelling to the unknown. It started around 9 PM, which coincidentally was when I took all my LSD trips. In total, I've had roughly 6, varying from 150 to 400 micrograms. Anyway, that night, I got 4 150 microgram gel tabs. They were a bluish purple colour, which I haven't actually seen before, only yellow and a distinct blue. I was sceptical, but I really wanted to trip that night and trusted the source. My girlfriend, who has schizophrenia and didn't know it could worsen her condition, and myself, split the 4, taking 2 each. About an hour goes by and I start feeling tense, almost a sense of euphoria. My jaw started locking up, which was normal for me. My girlfriend, on the other hand, was playing GTA 5 on her Xbox, and started crying uncontrollably, which set my mood off to a bad start. Eventually she calmed down and explained the come up of the acid just made her cry and nothing was wrong, which made me feel better. A few hours go by, and I'd say it's around 12 AM at this point, when we're watching these YouTube music clips. We're laughing and having a great time, and then that's when the acid really starts to come into play. We've smoked around 6 bong packs at this point as well. We were chronic smokers. My girlfriend, let's call her A, started making food, and I was a bit worried she may hurt herself or worse, since she'd never had a breakthrough before. We then have a talk to make sure we're both safe enough to not be in the same room, and something just clicked to where we became connected. We unconsciously started speaking telepathically, and didn't realise until a while later. After we ate, we sat down at our table to smoke some more, and I started forgetting what I was doing, even who I was. My memories were gone. I called my sister to make sure she was still real, and she answered indeed, and confirmed that she is not a figment of my imagination at all. And this put me into a loop. For hours I kept forgetting who I was and what I was doing. I then lay down. A and I started talking about how good we felt and that this was a good choice, really showing our love. And for some reason, I was staring into A's eyes and decided to cross mine. Little did I know how bad of an idea that actually was. It immediately turned my vision into a kaleidoscope, and I screamed "fuck," thinking that was the gate key to being in a permanent trip. Keep in mind, after this, my vision turned into a constant kaleidoscope, with these rainbow array of phosphenes. My third eye was completely open, so I had that fisheye lens vision. I really thought this was the end of me, and I quite possibly thought that I was going to die that night. And I thought it'd be a good idea to go in the shower to try and sober up, but it didn't change anything. I felt like I was inside of a grid when I was in the tub. The water wasn't even touching my body. The beads that fly out the sides of the main stream is what my body was picking up. It's one of the coolest things I've ever seen. I was feeling like a giant alien taking a warm shower with A. It was almost magical, but because of the paranoia, it ruined it. I soon began to melt into the background of the bathroom, and flipped the bath mat because I got lost in the pattern, and immediately ran out of the bathroom back into my room with A. Now this is when I really started to notice the telepathic conversations. I picked up if I was facing A, we would speak telepathically without trying. I didn't like that because of a schizophrenia. But like thousands of voices were speaking at once and was very overwhelming. I learned if I turned away and didn't make eye contact or had my back turned, it wouldn't activate and I could keep my own thoughts separate. I was worried if we had our minds merged, we would literally become one in that very moment and not have our past lives. Yet, we would transcend to space and be shown the truth of the universe. At one point we literally thought we were Adam and Eve, that we were the only two people on Earth, and we no longer were on our planet. I did indeed open the back door to make sure we were still on Earth, and to my surprise and happiness, we hadn't left. It was still very frightening, and we did think we would die for sure, but we went to bed around 11 AM and accepted our fate. We woke up around 16 hours later, and to our surprise, we were alive. We decided the apartment we were staying in was evil and had this bad energy, and that we must leave at once. Every day we went back home, it reminded us of how awful our trip was and had to escape. We moved from New York, Long Island, to Las Vegas, Nevada. It was a little better, but the flashbacks followed. We were on the verge of possibly ending this torturous nightmare. My HPPD after my trip, I'd see a Fibonacci spiral in constant colour change patterns when I'd look at the sky at night. Before I went to bed, this was burned into my brain, and then one day it just went away. I'd see my nose more frequently than I ever remembered. I wanted to cut it off. And for 6 months straight, I had this intense pressure on my forehead, where my pineal gland is. It's where your third eye activates, and I was worried it'd just open up any time. It didn't in the end, and that pressure has gone away. But then, I'd smoke weed and be put right back into the trip weeks after. My thoughts were rushing sometimes, but have calmed down. I looked into spirituality a lot, trying to figure out if I was still tripping. But I just gave up and accepted that this is what it is. My world seems normal and not in a trip-like state, so I'd say I'm not in a perma-trip. I think it's all mental, and if you don't think about it, it won't be present, so just live your life really. I could go on, but I think you all get the gist. I hope you all have safe, responsible trips, and to always check your substances with a test kit to make sure it's the real thing. I think the tabs I had on that trip may have been fake, and deep inside, it bothers me. But in the end, I think the bad trip was very inspirational, and has led me to some great opportunities. I now have a 100k a year job, and I'm sober. Before this, I was about to go homeless because of my weed addiction, and I was working this dead-end job. Somehow, I think my bad trip saved me, even though it was one of the most traumatic experiences I've ever had. 1,000 lifetimes. A Salvia trip report posted by A Main to the Salvia subreddit 3 years ago. I come home from working a 12-hour day, a killer Sunday brunch shift where I managed, in good spirits as usual. My new roommate, who reintroduced me to LSD, says that she got some salvia in the mail, and maybe we should all try it. I was going to be off the next day, so I tried to be the big boy and vouched to go first. I sit down on the couch facing the TV, which is just a big black rectangle in my field of vision and a white wall surrounding it. We debate between ourselves whether to use a pipe or bong. I said that I would use the bong instead. The bag said 10x, but I have to imagine that someone either messed up the bagging, or I just did way too much. I loaded up what I would say was a full bowl, although I had no idea about any of this stuff. She didn't even tell me that the 3-gram bag she'd got had cost over $100. To me, it looked like shit, and I was already underestimating what would actually happen. I take this huge rip with a small torch, and the whole bowl disappears almost instantly. I have a glass screen, so I know I didn't lose any of it. I held it all in for probably 25 seconds, and then I fell straight to my left, right off of the couch and onto the floor. Bear in mind, I'm 6'6" and 260 pounds. All that follows is happening while I'm apparently rolling around on the living room floor for less than 3 minutes. The experience for me starts with the last thing I saw, the television. I call it the frame, black and void. I slip down into the couch and feel my face become 10,000 replicas like a flipbook, but you're just letting the pages fly away as you fall. Then, I have no face at all. I have no body, no eyes or hands to touch anything with. I am now fully aware that I am consciousness. I know this because I heard or maybe even saw the word in front of me. In this state, I am about the size of a bean, perfectly oval-shaped, and I feel smooth but not hard, almost like a gel cap with liquid inside. I am now on the machine. I'm being held by something that looks like a long, slender metal rod with a scoop that cradles my bean of consciousness. I feel myself no longer falling or sliding, but now I can tell that I am moving forward like a big Ferris wheel, but not a fun one. I can't stop it or slow it down, and it starts moving faster and faster. I'm now seeing the black frame of the TV once again, a black rectangle. And now here is where crazy shit really starts to go down. Imagine your head is placed back against a wall. In a millisecond, you are propelled from one side to the other, and when you hit the other side, your face is smashing through glass, the black void rectangle. It wasn't painful per se, but you could feel it. And each time I hit this glass, I entered a different life. When I tell you that I lived 1,000 lives, I'm not joking. I now feel like I'm older than time itself. The ones I can remember very clearly was going from childhood to being a full 45-year-old man and dying of cancer in a hospital. I must say that in my actual reality, I am nowhere near 45 at all. I legitimately remember watching my kids grow up, having a wife, crying and laughing, and loving people and feeling every single bit of it. My name in this reality was David. My actual name is not David. I was also a prehistoric man. I hunted small animals, I ate vegetables. I had people around, but we didn't talk. I remember trees and grass and rocks, as well as a mountain. In another, I was a large black woman in one life. I don't remember much, but she was pretty and had a very loud voice. I remember my bedroom and it had yellow wallpaper with diamonds printed on it. I had an old white car with cream-coloured seats. Thousands of these happened, and between each of them, I smashed through the glass black void every time, feeling my face hit hard glass and hearing the break and shatter noises like a movie sound effect. Each one of these felt like a lifetime, but at the same time, they were instantaneously beginning and then over faster than you could blink. At some point, I heard a voice. I heard laughter. I remembered that I didn't want to live these lives. I just wanted to be back with my girlfriend and wanted to remember what my own life was. I somehow turned my consciousness beam to the left, and I felt a bad presence. It was making me see all of these lives. It was making me endure this machine. I just wanted off. I'm now looking to the left, and I can see the frames which encompass the alternate lives. They were flipping past me, and I realised that I didn't actually have to live through them. I could just watch them pass by. I wanted to find my own frame. Then suddenly, I have hands again, or at least fingers, and I can touch the frames and look at the image. It felt hard to do this, I must say. It felt desperate. I had no coordination. I was just touching as many as I could. I then hear another voice. I hear more laughter, although this time good laughter. Then I find my own frame. I grab it and put my face into it. Like, how else would you get into it? No glass smashing this time though. It feels like goo, like gel. It's clear and smooth, but I feel like I cannot breathe. I feel my arms and my face returning to me. I can swim through the goo. I pull myself through what feels like 100 yards. I feel like I'm 100 feet long. I can see a light within this void. I can see a face. I can actually see my living room. I grab the edges of the image and pull myself towards it, and it feels like I squeeze my face through a big butthole, and then pow, I hear this snap. I hear my friends say my name, my actual name. They sit me down on the couch, and I'm now back home. I take a few minutes to figure out if it's real or not, and then I started crying. It just felt like it wasn't real at all. I felt like I'd been gone far too long, and felt like I betrayed my girlfriend for living other lives for so very, very long. This all occurred around 2 years ago now. When it happened, I became depressed for about 4 months. I didn't feel like I belonged in this world anymore. I wasn't sure any of it was even real. I felt like work was trivial, after I'd already lived and died 1,000 times. And they were all so quick. Why did I even have to do this life thing anymore? I never really told anybody until now how I felt on the inside. I couldn't tell my girlfriend that I felt like life was pointless or possibly even fabricated. That I believed I actually went into some other dimension and bent time itself. After 2 years, I wish I could go back to the same place without fear and confront it all once more. But I do not think that I could ever try it again. There's a feeling I get in the back of my neck that tells me not to, or I'll be smashed through glass for another eternity, by something that feels the need to punish me for taking every day's moment for granted. Please start small if you're gonna do this. Don't be a fucking hero. I realised I had some depression to deal with, and this in a way helped me to come to terms with it in a sense. I realised how much I love the frame I am in now. I don't want to be a guy named David or a fucking caveman. I haven't had a good psych trip since that. I get the back of the neck feeling when I try other stuff or even get too high on herb. maybe it's a good thing. I've chilled out a lot since then. The problem is though, is I almost believe that when I die, I'll have to go back on the wheel forever. Maybe we all will. Maybe that's the cycle. All I'll say is enjoy your precious moments, folks. This life is important and unique. I have a video of me rolling around on the ground. If enough people want to see it and made it to the bottom of this post, maybe I'll put it up. But it is pretty fucking stupid. And I wish I could edit it to not show my face. TLDR. Fucking salvia, man. This is all 100% true, and it will stay with me forever. Life's Realizations, Purgatory and Change. An MDMA and 2CB trip report by American Buddha, posted to earwid.org October 11th, 2003. This is the most profound, life-changing, ecstatic, scary, demonic, metaphysical, intense, and difficult experience I have ever had. Let me give you some background information about me. I was looking to an answer for my social acceptability on religion, life, and fear of death. I tried to be more socially acceptable by experimenting with different drugs such as MDMA, weed, mushrooms, salvia, DXM, LSA, and nitrous. Through this experience, I have found why I experimented with these drugs in the first place, and why I don't need them anymore. This was my chemical catalyst for me. Everything has a higher meaning now. This new state of consciousness can be obtained without the use of psychedelic drugs. But psychedelic drugs can open your mind to new perception and realities. My new mind is now working in different and new ways. Before the trip. It's Friday morning. B and I left to visit his cousin. His cousin, A, had some 2CB on him, so we wanted to meet him and try it. A is someone who I thought we had similar interests in, which was drugs. He's a stranger, and his apartment was filled with a lot of interesting shamanistic, chi-like art, as well as books and other psychedelic items. We were planning a wonderful experience, but in the end it totally changed my views on perception, as well as reality, religion, truth, and it will continue to change me forever. Friday night, we all smoked a bit of kind bud, and we all got really high. A was rapping like a madman. I didn't understand this at the time, but later on, I did. B snorted about 20 milligrams of 2CB that night. He was very euphoric, and he loved the visuals. He told me it was a really nice experience, so I was happy about that, and was excited to try 2CB the next day. No turning back. The next day, A and I dropped 2 MDMA pills containing a small amount of meth. About 30 minutes later, we felt the very euphoric, lovey-dovey happy effects of MDMA. We each snorted about 15 milligrams of 2CB. I'd never snorted anything, and always had fears about snorting because it looked like something a coke addict would do. But I snorted it with no fears, because I was rolling, and the burn wasn't so horrible because I was rolling as well. B also snorted about 15 milligrams of the 2CB. We decided it would be good to go to the pool and swim on that hot day. By the time we got to the pool, we were all starting to feel the effects. Harmony. We arrived by the pool and dove in. The water felt great, and I was seeing these rainbow-coloured refractions on every ripple and current on the water. Swimming felt great, talking was smooth. I had no fears of what other people thought. I was seeing the birds and beautiful dragonflies flying around, and it was in perfect harmony with everything. I saw the fine, intricate details in everything as well. The details that normally are not seen are now seen. The beauty in nature that's always there. I recognised this and appreciated it. We got out of the pool and decided to go to the hillside. It felt so perfect walking there barefooted on the grass. The trees, plants, animals, the sky, and even human beings felt like everything was in harmony and perfect. The clouds in the sky swirled as I stared at them, sort of like the painting Starry Night with its cloud swirls. It was so beautiful and ecstatic. The sun's rays and myself felt great. We chilled and talked for a while as I watched the most beautiful visuals melting around me. Birds and entities. I felt in harmony with nature and everything around me. Life's realizations. We all went back to A's apartment. It showed us this video which was very trippy. The video showed the Earth and how life got started. The visuals were great at this point, and things made total, complete sense. Many things that related to my life were in that video. I also saw the energy that's in everything. I appreciated all the art in his apartment, and later realised it all had a deeper meaning. I can't describe everything. Everything was in the details. Thousands of details I could appreciate and realise that normally I would shrug off. A had this psychedelic art book as I was looking at the images, and I realised that this was how life was. All the images somehow related to my life as a human being in some way. A was playing music, and this ended up being the revelation and downfall of the trip. At first, the music all had meaning to my life. Every lyric was somehow tied to it. A was actually rapping to the music at the exact same time. Every conflicting problem that related to good or bad was introduced in the lyrics. During this time, I felt the energy and the voices in the lyrics were trying to bring me into the light. I tried to embrace the light to the end. I just wasn't ready. It wouldn't accept me. I then felt this incredible tingling sensation, but somehow knew I couldn't let go of death in the physical body, so the incredible tingling slowly creeped out of my body. I tried my best to embrace the light to the end, but I wasn't ready at all, and it wouldn't accept me. At times, I thought I was embracing God in the light, or the ball of light. But I realise now that names don't matter. The feeling of this love and energy is all the same. Lord, Ali. Names don't matter. It's all the feeling in your spirit which matters. Tuning into the lyrics led to practically ego dissolving after very difficult experiences. Purgatory. At times when I thought he was being truthful, I perceived A as Jesus Christ, and then as someone else when I didn't feel the truth from him. I was having these battling conflicts into my perception of reality. Living in a world of Eastern religion origin and brought up in a Christian home may have been a cause of seeing Jesus Christ. Being in a New Age shamanistic apartment didn't help this. I didn't know what was true. I told A and B to leave the apartment so I can work it out without any influence on me. The rapping was still playing, and it felt like hell. It was now all negative. I thought the lyrics were a figment of my imagination. It was now 12 hours after we had the MDMA and 2CB, but these thoughts still lingered. For 2 whole hours, I was conflicting with my own religious issues. Was this evil use of drugs leading me to the devil? Were the feelings of Jesus Christ that were embracing me fake because of these drugs? I screamed because of the voices. I tried praying. If I messed up my words on praying, it was over, and the feelings disappeared from ecstasy to nothingness. I felt helpless. I kept on praying, but it just wouldn't help. A storm was brewing up outside, and I truly thought I was in hell. I thought I was going insane. Am I in hell? The thunder was getting stronger, the lightning more frequent. I went outside and everything felt like I was in a hellish landscape. I was out of control, so I laid on the couch in pain and fear. I was scared God couldn't accept me anymore, because the feelings I felt weren't real, and I had eaten the evil apple from the tree. B came and we left, but many incredible things happened during this time. Scientifically, I can explain this kind of bad trip at the end because of the MDMA crash. as well as the tiny bit of speed in the pills making my thoughts race. Spiritually speaking, I found out we need to find our own path in life and not let other people choose it for you. B came and we left, but many incredible things had happened during this time. Change. A lot of important details are left out because they have no meaning to you. Everyone is unique, and the life-changing experience will be unique for everyone. This chemical catalyst of 2CB and MDMA was able to change my whole perception of reality. Sure, it could have been because I was on a drug, but this type of experience will totally change me on how to live life and how I perceive it. This experience told me that drugs aren't the answer for me at all. I now have a journey to find my own path. Thank you for reading this far, and please respect psychedelic drugs. Drugs as a whole aren't for everyone, and I just hope you don't find out the hard way. The Octopus, a DMT trip report posted by the user Blackclow to the DMT Nexus on the 2nd of November 2006. Hey guys, I've found this rather intense DMT trip report from another forum. It's pretty wild. I packed the pipe with weed, and then on the dope, I placed with my brother's miniature pocket knife blade what I thought to be a little bit of the brown crystally goo, about 3 match heads worth. I torched carefully above the cone and sucked for all it was worth. Firstly, before anything, I noticed that my head had disappeared. Well, rather it was more like it no longer had boundaries as such. Then, the ringing in my ears and the hideous rush of a vascular headache occurred. The ringing deepened and became richer, louder. Then, a great bell tolled. Ask not for whom it tolls. The terrified attempt to calm myself failed miserably, as the vibration shattered me into an infinitum. I was still sitting there in the garden, so I knew I could go further. Lacking bodily coordination, I dumped roughly half of what I had left on the foil. I had been told it was a gram, the whole thing. Put this on a similar cone to the first, and repeated the torching. This time, because I could no longer tell if I possessed lungs, I must have pulled down the whopper of a hit, and what happened next is very hard to describe. The fear went up 1,000 notches. My knuckles, if I still had them, would have certainly been white, like the light that was consuming my whole body. Blazing white light all around. Fortunately, the headache subsided with the second hit, and I felt ready to extend my senses to feel where I was and what was happening. I remembered the veil, like rubber, or the surface of jelly stretched in front of me. There were no geometric patterns, a few weird fractals burnt like green fire from every surface I could see in the garden. I was in 2 places at once. It was so odd. And there was this veil like the surface of some deep pond before me. Then, something moved beyond it. Was that some sort of dorsal fin? I leaned forward to touch the surface of the membrane, and then what happened next, I swear, nearly killed me from its sheer bizarrity. From behind the white chair, or was it from inside it, a creature emerged. It was not a happy, smiley elf. To tell you the truth, I will not describe what I saw. It had innumerable tentacles. It was like a cross between some weird octopus or jellyfish. And the eyes. Oh my god, the eyes. I froze on the spot thinking, shit, this is it. I've really gone and done it now. Fucking toast. I never believed. I really should have believed. And now Now I'm at the mercy of something much, much bigger and complex, and clever, and definitely more malevolent than myself. I asked it its name, although I wish I had not asked. Its voice utterly destroyed me. It was like being caught in a storm of psychic noise, a whirlwind of deadly electrical shrapnel. I think I shuddered and started to drool uncontrollably at this point. I think I also urinated in my jeans. With its innumerable eyes, it gazed at me steady and extended a tendril. At that same moment, it fired a beam of light directly between and above my eyes. The alien laser was pinkish green. It hurt. I begged it to stop. I whimpered, "Please stop. You're hurting me. I'm just fragile. Please be careful. I'm sentient as well. I mean you no harm." It seemed to consider what I had to say for a brief moment. The laser was withdrawn, but the tendrils, of which there were more now, still held me in place. I was trying to make out details of its shape or structure, but the closer I looked, the more it slipped away from me. It seemed to tell me in some weird non-verbal fashion not to struggle, and to stop making noise with my eyes. I personally took this to mean, be calm, do not struggle, clear your head, see, but do not look. It then became a little clearer. It seemed to be cloaked in some way. Some sort of organic hood and covering was wrapped around it. Some sort of armour or protection. The tentacles had no substance as we know it, and the eyes, well, they were the most awe-inspiring and terrifying things I have ever beheld. They defied counting. They defied reason. This whole thing was too much, and I felt myself losing my mind. I just lost it. Gone. I can't recall all that much after this, except it rifling through my mind like it were a chest of drawers. Some rewiring took place. An awesome amount was uploaded to my cortex, and a sensation not unlike being at the dentist while being semi-conscious from nitrous. This sense of voices telling you it'll be all over soon, and that you've done really well. Really well. Hush, hush now. Then, when I was able, and the pinkish greenish light was withdrawn, I felt I could once again move. The creature had split into three, or maybe it had always been three, and there were several smaller blobs that were crawling around my feet. They seemed to be trying to sneak up on me. Fuck that, I thought, and kept a close eye on them, lest they molest me like their larger, scarier accomplice. It was at this point that I realised that the blobs were not the same as the other creature or creatures. They were entirely different, extremely tricky and fast-moving. One of them crawled up my leg and sat on my knee. Frankly, I was too horrified and fascinated to stop it. I noticed it had a little hat. It had little stripy white and green trousers as well, and pointy, curly shoes. But at this point, let's just say I wasn't at home anymore. They seemed friendly enough, and I let them crawl inside my nose and ears and chest and legs and, well, whatever it was they wanted to enter. Eventually, it all faded, and further attempts to enter the world were prohibited. It seemed I'd been barred for now. Just a headache and a sensation of, no. Okay, just typing that out has made me feel all weird, and I need a stiff drink after that. Thank you, and good night. Oh, but before I go, I must say that, no, I had not read many DMT trip reports prior to this. This is what I truly find disturbing about it all. Frankly, I do not require another's belief that this really happened to me. I can barely get my head around it myself. Why elves? Why elves, damn it? And what's with the Philip K. Dick type entity? I swear, I had not been exposed to those particular stories before this experience. A Journey to the Multiverse Within, a 1500 microgram LSD trip report sent in by a subscriber. So I decided to finally submit my report. This is quite a detailed one, and I've tried to include as much as I could remember. One final thing though before I start. I apologise in advance for any grammatical mistakes and such, and I certainly don't mean to impose my views and or rationality on anyone in any form. I'm simply just presenting my own experience and my own thoughts regarding the matter. So, let's begin. The setup. I've always been curious about acid. I wondered what it would be like to hallucinate. Would I see the things with my own eyes, or would it be more like a visual imagination? Finally, it was the time to know. It was around 9 PM. I was with my best friend, let's call him K, and one of his friends as well, who we'll call O. We were at a beach, Kalangut Beach, Goa, India. I got the paper, which the dealer promised me is 1500 micrograms in total, and asked me only to eat one half, otherwise I'd been mad messed up, to quote his words. But of course, I ate the whole thing. I took the paper and sucked on it. As time passed, we became curious about what would happen and when. Kay thought the dealer tricked us, and that was just a plain paper with some colours on it. About an hour of sitting there, I felt weird, and told Kay that something was kicking in. He seemed sceptical, and thought I was only saying that to justify to myself that I wasn't cheated. The onset. I felt sand on the beach racing about, trying to come up from the surface. I looked up, and saw stars that started moving. K and O were still thinking I'm trying to show off just to cover up because the guy had scammed us. I got up and roamed about on the beach, and then hands started coming out from the sand. They were grabbing me, trying to pull me down into it. I was skipping the sand and jumping here and there to avoid being grabbed. I looked up, and the stars all turned green, and were shooting these green beams of light down to the beach. I lay down and saw them moving fast, creating a 3D wireframe of green lights while shooting green beams down below. As I looked again towards the horizon, in the dark shade of sea, I saw mountain tops peaking at the end. Then, I saw a Colossus Buddha lying sideways, where there were mountains just a moment before. I asked Kay to take me back to our hotel, because I realised it was going to get out of hand real soon. Putting my hands over his shoulder, we left for the hotel, me still trying to avoid being caught by those hands which were coming out from the sand. Prelude. Just as we got out of the sand onto the road, a slow, soft music started to play, and everything felt in slow motion. Pedestrians were disappearing, and colourful lights began to cover my view. Our hotel was in a dark alley near to the beach, about a 5 minutes walk. When we got there, I had totally lost all my motor skills, and was completely relying on Kay to take me to the rooms safely. Just before we were about to enter the hotel, I had to close my eyes because the lights and colours I saw were so intense that I felt I'd go blind if I kept looking at them. It felt like staring into the sun, but with millions of colours instead of just yellow, and it covered my whole peripheral vision. When we finally entered the room, that's when the trip really started to step up. The journey. Inception. In the room, I could open my eyes. The intensity of light decreased tremendously. There were faces coming out from the walls, all kinds of faces. Mostly animals with sharp teeth, wolves, dogs, demons, dragons and whatnot. The floor tiles started to break and move apart. I lay on the bed and the music got so intense, and this cloud formed over my head and started dripping blood. K&O was sitting in the terrace while I laid there on the bed. I felt highly dehydrated and was drinking whenever I felt conscious, which was about every 20 to 30 minutes. About 2 to 3 hours in, I remember no concept of time, I'm just telling the time of events as per what K&O told me later. I felt quite hungry, because we haven't had dinner at all. I went to the terrace and grabbed a piece of a roll that Kay was eating. But just as I looked outside, I saw a T-Rex coming from behind the tree, and I dropped the roll and went inside to save my life, as I was sure he was coming to eat me. Story 1. After that T-Rex came to eat me, I ran inside and lay on the bed again. Then, I saw there were people around me. Doctors in their white coats, performing some sort of procedure or something. They cut my stomach open, and the only light I could see was the one they shine on the patient's organs. They were discussing something. Then, it all went blank. After a while, I remember it was a dark night, and there were no lights whatsoever. I was in a graveyard, and I was carrying a large cross sign. Story 2. After that graveyard scene, everything went blank. I gained my consciousness again, and had some water. Kay was worried sick, and he was searching on the net what to do to calm an acid peak and whatnot. He asked me if I was alright, but I couldn't put together any words. The music hadn't faded, but the intensity of it had slowed down. I lay down again on the bed, and shot once again into another world. I don't know how to really describe it, but if any of you have played Batman Arkham Asylum, then there's a scene with Scarecrow where he's in space, with fragments of ruins from houses scattered around in the form of a circle, of which Scarecrow is in the middle. Batman must hide from his vision, while reaching for the last point to kill the Scarecrow. Well, I was there. I was the Bat-fucking-man. I saw the Scarecrow and I had to save my life. I don't know how I saved my life though. After a long time of escaping his vision and jumping around, I again went blank. Story 3. I once again gained consciousness for a while. O was asleep. Kay was just lying there. My motor skills were better. I went to pee and washed my face, but the shape morphing and everything else was still there. I called my girlfriend, which took over 10 minutes to dial, and told her that all this shit was happening to me. She got crazy worried, but Kay talked to her and ensured that he was taking care of me. I sloughed on the bed again, and as I lay down and closed my eyes, the peak took over me, and I got lost in another vision. This time, there was a huge staircase in the middle of nowhere. Just a spiral staircase and some people on it at different levels. The camera zoomed in, and it focused on an old guy. And guess what? That old guy was none other than me. Just as the focus was on his, or my face, there was also a waiter carrying coffee, and he bumped into me and spilt the coffee all over me. The camera again zoomed out to put the whole staircase in the view, and then zoomed in again, this time focusing on the waiter. And, sort of unexpectedly, that waiter is also me. Now, as I was descending the stairs, a kid bumped into me that made me spill the coffee on that old man, who, again, was me. It zoomed out once again to get the whole staircase in view, and started zooming in again. But this time, the focus was on the kid, and to no surprise, that kid was me. I was playing with a bouncy ball. I was trying to catch it when I was running, and I bumped into the waiter that made him spill his coffee on the old me. Finally, again the view was all zoomed out to cover the whole staircase, and this time while it zoomed in, it focused on an infant in his mother's arms who was feeding on her breast. And, to no one's surprise, that infant was also only me. Interlude. After this part, I gained some sense of consciousness, I had water, went to pee again, and peed a lot. As I was coming back from the restroom, I noticed that our hotel room was flying in space, shattered into pieces, with nothing but void all around it. I sat on the terrace and smoked a cigarette by myself. K and O were both asleep. I went to bed again and decided to lie down. Ego death and meeting the source. It's been more than a year, but my hands still shiver as I think about that moment and try to put that down in words. I'll try my best to recreate it, but no matter how hard I try, I'm sure I cannot exactly put how I feel into words. This time when I lay down, my eyes close. I saw stickman figures, more like that gingerbread man figure in Shrek. It was all black except for them, and there were a lot of them, in green colour. They were joining hands to form a circle while their legs spread outwards. It was a bit like when a father swings his child by his hands and his legs spread outward with the force. Their legs were in that position, and they're all coming from outward to join hands and become one. First, there was only one circle like this, and there were more, lots of them, everywhere. The music that was playing is inexplicable. It felt like my brain was about to orgasm. Then the circle came down, zooming in at infinite speed, and took my hands to join them too. But just as soon as I held the hands, the circle moved back up again, taking me up with them, moving in a spiral inward motion, concentrating to a single point. But then, I lost my hands. It felt thwarting. But then, they came back down again, taking me again by my hands, and like them, I was a gingerbread man too. They came down and took me again, and we all, in this circle, and all others in their respective circles, started to move spirally inward, trying to collapse into a single point. But again, I had lost my hands. It was as if you were in a video game and you're in a final boss fight. You just keep losing and losing and losing. But you know you are about to win. This is about to end. Well, I felt just like that. And I knew I was at the verge of something big. I could feel it. The anticipation was running extreme. And then, the cycle repeated. They all came down again. I joined hands, and we started moving inward in spiral direction. But this time, I didn't let go. And fuck, I died. Just when I merged with them, and we concentrated into a single infinitesimal point of oneness, my brain filled with what I can easily say is 1,000 orgasms. And then, it all went blank. Nothingness. Void, death, life, abyss. Everything and nothing all together. The whole concept of humanity, life, death, love and hate faded into pure nothingness. And that one infinitesimally small point was the source. It was what empowered the whole creation and existence of not only the humanity, but the whole universe. After that, I don't remember a thing. I don't know how long I was out. I don't know how I came back. As per though, K and O, as I passed out, worried them sick. They wondered if I was dead or not. My heart was beating, but I was totally unconscious. I regained my conscious, according to them, after about half an hour or so. This was around 6 in the morning. The final chapter. After coming back from the ego death, I wasn't talking to anybody. I was just observing things around me. Each and everything seemed so beautiful that I cannot find words to define it. About 7 AM in the morning, I was standing on the terrace, and the sun was just rising. To this day, I have not witnessed a more beautiful sunrise in my entire life. I could feel the air blowing through my hairs. I could see the grass. I appreciated the tiny little insects that were there in the room. When I saw the sun, I felt life, the meaning, love, and the sense of oneness. I could feel every single ray of sun hitting me, and hitting millions of things and people on this earth, giving birth to life as we know it. Just as I was witnessing this miracle of life, I decided to smoke another joint. But when I was done with that, the hallucinations started up again, and I had this urge to lie down on the bed once more. My eyes closed, and this time I saw waves, a bit like those in mathematics, sine and cosine waves, and those waves were inside a huge auditorium and were slowly ascending. I saw people sitting there by the sides of the walls, smoking, talking, laughing, and I remember thinking to myself, holy shit, people live there? What is this place? Who are these people? And then the waves continued, leading me to the room, and then the doors of the room opened. And again, my mind went completely blank. I don't remember what or whom I saw in that room. I just remember waking up after about an hour. After my death, born again, with a new spirit like that of a newborn baby. Conclusion and aftermath. Even though I have tried to put in every single detail of my trip, or at least as much as I can remember, I know I can never put in words the feeling that I had in the trip. There's a saying that curiosity killed the cat, but I don't know how many know the full version of it, which is curiosity killed the cat, but satisfaction brought it back. This is exactly what happened to me. I was just doing it for fun, and just to see what it feels like to see visions, but it ended up changing my life more than anything ever did, or anything could ever do. I was already an atheist, but now I realize that the universe, the atoms, are all nothing but one. And our purpose is only restrained by our own self-absorbed human dogma, while the universe, life, and the existence itself is a much bigger reality. The Acid Hole, an LSD and ketamine trip report posted to the LSD subreddit by the user C Slicker over 3 years ago. Some background info on the trip. My brother, his girlfriend, and myself rented a motel to trip in at the beach this past weekend. My brother was candy-flipping for the first time. He had 100 micrograms of LSD and 100 milligrams of MDMA. His girlfriend was trying shrooms for the first time, around 2 grams, and I planned on K-holing for the first time on day 1, and then tripping on a tab the following morning. As I planned, I K-holed the night of our arrival. It was a bizarre experience to say the least, but it did not hold a candle to the insanity of the following day. As the title suggests, I decided to try some kitty while peaking on acid, and let me tell you, it was absolutely bananas. The experience. All of our trips started out fairly normal. We were just chilling in the hotel room having a nice come up and enjoying the ride. I had the normal patterning and melting open eye visuals that acid usually gives me, and the same light fractal closed eye visuals that 100 micrograms never fails to provide. At the 3-hour mark, I decided that I would do some more ketamine, to see how it reacted with the acid. I knew the combo was safe, but I'd actually heard very few reports of it online. Since I was tripping out, it was really hard to measure out my dosage or make lines, so I ended up just spilling some K on the table and insufflating it. If I were to guess, I'd say it was about 200 milligrams or so, but I honestly cannot be sure. Anyway, I barely felt the powder enter my nose, but the taste of the ketamine was instantly overwhelming. Very quickly, I began to slip away, which started out with me feeling as though I were moving backwards at high speeds on an old locomotive. The crazy part here is that when I closed my eyes and was immersed in the K-hole, I could see the hotel room that I was in. I was gliding on what appeared to be a roller coaster track that was attached to a fractal web of geometry. From there, the closed-eye visuals just exploded into what I can only describe as spiritual visions. I saw these unfurling fractal machines with yin and yang symbols, hundreds of eyes, tongues with rainbow LSD tabs on them, and lots of people fucking. It was almost disturbing how much fucking was going on in this other dimension that was encased within my mind. At one point, the fractal world cleared, and I saw an enormous temple made out of 2 stone statues of people fucking. Or was it 4? It was a strange perspective of illusion, where the sex positions were different from a bird's eye view than they were from the ground level, and this was all occurring at the centre of a lake. The temple looked somewhat like this crude sketch that I made, only there was an opening where the female's womb was supposed to be, and a meditating Buddha in the lotus position that was looking into the shrine inside. As I started to swing out of the K-hole, I saw more people having sex, and women giving birth. Then, for a lack of a better term, I was atomized, and I saw the layers of my own existence. At a surface level, I was a person, but zooming in, I became an organ system. Then the organs themselves, the molecules, cells, atoms, subatomic particles, and eventually, even empty space. I ascended back up the ladder and past my human form, zooming out this time into the planet, the solar system, the galaxy, the universe, and eventually, beyond that, into the fractal cosm. Finally, I returned to my human form, and the ketamine wore off. The remainder of the trip was pretty awesome, but nothing out of the realm of typical LSD. Well, anyhow, that was my crazy experience with K and acid. I hope you enjoyed it. First ego death. A 16-gram mushroom trip report, posted by BriefJump9044 to the Shroom subreddit 3 months ago. Hey guys, so I've been lurking on Reddit forever, but I've never actually posted anything. First of all, whenever I pop in this forum, it always puts a smile on my face how supportive and funny you all are. Hope this word vomit makes sense, or at least is entertaining. Last night, I brewed 16 grams into a tea and drank it. I've been curious about ego death, and I felt like I've pushed the mushrooms further for a while. I've taken large doses before, but never got to where I wanted to go. Last night, I finally did it. My closed-eye visuals started off fun. There was a lot of repeating patterns in the style of 90s to early 2000s cartoons. I saw a lot of cartoon clowns, and as I got deeper into the experience, these patterns started to become more abstract, and things began breaking up. The cartoon clowns and cartoonish visuals in general became a little hellish. I remember seeing red and black. I think my ego was dying, and it was scared, although I wasn't. But something inside me was being broken up into a million pieces, but I just couldn't remember for the life of me what it was. What was I doing? How did I get here? I think I lost someone. I think he was my friend. I need to find him. It was then that I began to understand a quote that I'd read. Something to the effect of, "Shrooms cannot kill you, but they'll make you think they can." I couldn't breathe. I was sure I was dying, but I didn't know who I was. Luckily, something inside me was still conscious, and would occasionally throughout the experience tell me to relax and breathe. Suddenly, my conscience got tangled up in every other person I'd ever met. It was exactly like the scene from Everything Everywhere All at Once, where Evelyn becomes like Jobu, and she simultaneously comes into alignment with every one of her alternative lifetimes, and she's just screaming and can't sort any of them out. Except it wasn't different versions of my ego, but a million different people, and I couldn't decipher which was the real me. At some point, I realised I could be whoever I wanted to be by focusing on that person. But something wasn't right. I thought I was going to be stuck in this loop forever, living everyone else's life all at the same time, without knowing who I truly was. But my friend, I need to find my friend. I think his name was, well, it's my name. He's lost, and I need to find him. I used to be Christian when I was a kid, but I'm not anymore. At some point in the experience, I became Adam yelling at Eve for eating the fruit. And then I became Eve. I didn't know. He said it was okay. I then became Cain killing Abel. I didn't know, he hurt me first. I was a caveman drawing on a cave. Then I just started flashing through images of mankind developing, and I kept seeing them hurting each other. I was God, and I was angry. I came into existence and I was alone. When one version of me dies, I just become another person who gets hurt, all while I'm on a giant rock called Earth heading towards its own demise. What happens when the Earth dies? I'll still be alone. If you watch Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, where Star-Lord finds out his dad is a celestial being or god of a planet, that's what I felt I was. I kept thinking things like, my father, some super god, left me here, real god, on Earth to suffer. Where is he? Why did he leave me here? I then became my grandpa, and I saw him hurting my dad, who then hurt my friend, me. There I was. Over the past couple of years, I've been more and more aware of all the people in my life who had hurt me. I was convinced it was my fault, and there was something wrong with me. It didn't matter how many people, friends, family, therapists, that told me it wasn't my fault, because I simply could not believe them. After losing my ego and becoming everyone I ever loved, I saw that somebody hurt them first, and they'll just keep passing the pain from one person to the next, until there was just me. Will I just end up passing the pain, or can I stop it? Can I even stop the cycle? Once the panic started to subside, and I could feel the endless looping of other lifetimes coming to a slow stop, I suddenly became Eve again. I was looking at Adam. He was dumb and proud, and he hurt me. But he was beautiful, and I loved him. I was Adam looking at Eve. She's reckless and impulsive, but also beautiful, kind. I loved her. I was God again, realizing that just maybe I was also beautiful, and that maybe I can choose love. As I fully settled back into myself, it was about 5 to 6 in the morning. Most, if not all my visuals at this point had been closed eye, or just in my head like daydreams. I got to ride the final waves of my trip, looking out my bathroom window into my neighbourhood, watching the sunrise. The beautiful muted pinks and blues of the sky, with the greens of the grass and the colours of the houses. It felt like a visual you'd see on a lo-fi playlist and mixtape. I pondered the power of love, and watched the sky buzz and the grass sway, until the shrooms finally wore off, and the world was still once again. Thank you for reading. Safe tripping, everyone. Alien Abduction in Hyperspace. A DMT trip report, posted by Stridency, to earwid.org, February 7th, 2016. I remember almost 2 years ago, reading on this site how the substance DMT affects our brains, bodies, spirits, or whatever else, also on many other different sites as well. DMT Hyperspace, something I never would have ever imagined to be an actuality, to be an actual reality that may very well be real. I remember laughing at a site's FAQ, explaining the possibilities on how and what DMT does and or is. Back then, I was 16 years old, and since that time, I've had experience with psilocybin mushrooms and LSD a great number of times, and they were, and still are, some of the most amazing and most beautiful experiences I've ever had in my entire life. Though sometimes the most terrifying as well. It wasn't until recently that I've obtained a large amount of DMT, and I was very much excited. I had extremely high expectations, and I've been waiting for more than 2 years to finally break through to DMT hyperspace. So here is my story. In the recent past and current present, I've been experimenting with large doses of DMT. At first, I started off with lower doses, getting a mild DMT body high and visuals, slightly similar to the peak of an LSD or psilocybin trip, but only lasting around 5 to 10 minutes, which sounds about right for the DMT experience. I was getting to these levels at first with a group of friends, as were they, but none of us ever came close to breaking into a hyperspace. I started to have my doubts, but I knew subconsciously that there was still more to the substance. I perhaps just hadn't perfected the technique in smoking it out of an oil burner or glass vaporizer. It wasn't until recently, when I finally perfected the process in vaporizing and smoking the substance, and reaching a hyperspace of some description. Colours would randomly appear in front of me, merging within everything, becoming one. It was an amazing thing, an amazing feeling, an amazing experience like no other, I thought to myself. I was getting to this place, assuming that this place was the highest level of DMT, and assuming this was the hyperspace that everybody was talking about. However, I was very wrong. The first time it happened, I was in my apartment by myself, away from friends, family, all of that. I did it sitting in a pretty comfortable game chair that I got for Christmas one year, which was set up in my room. I was able to get around 3 very large, very long hits in when it happened. It wasn't really like being shot out of a cannon into hyperspace or anything like that, but something different. It was more. Well, it was in fact a teleportation. I was teleported into an alien spaceship compartment, flying through space. I don't mean like it was kind of like an alien spaceship or something, or I thought it was an alien spaceship. Nah, it really was an alien spaceship. There weren't colours everywhere. It wasn't like I travelled through hyperspace, or anything that had happened to me in the past. This was so real. It was so detailed in every possible way. It was like I was really there, in a spaceship. It was reality. I wasn't dreaming, tripping, anything like that. I was actually there. The entire time I sat there, I was unable to move, but I was just gazing in amazement at everything. And I felt this presence. I felt an alien presence above me, like they were watching me, observing me. It was almost as if they were talking to me telepathically, communicating with me through thought, trying to show me things, or perhaps that they were trying to experiment with me. I was so afraid, confused, yet amazed, all at the same time. It seemed to me like I was there for almost an hour, and maybe I was. My perception of time was out of the window though, and my mind was in total shock. The last thing I remember while being in that spaceship is a strong telepathic signal from one of the aliens that triggered something inside of me. I was able to look down at my legs, my arms, seeing my bones twisting and turning, my hair building thicker and thicker. I was turning into a monkey, and it was so real, I just can't stress that enough. I was totally freaking out when everything just suddenly teleported back to my room, back to my reality. Even though the hyperspace and the aliens had gone, I was still tripping very hard. Everything around me was twisting and turning. My bones would still twist and turn if I looked at them long enough. When I looked in the mirror, I looked like I was an alien. Everything was just off, and it was so intense. This lasted for at least 30 minutes or so, which eventually faded as I laid in my bed, not being able to stop thinking, not being able to sleep. My entire body, mind, and spirit was in total awe. The next day, I told my roommate everything that happened, and he, like myself, was always fascinated by DMT, and always joked about alien life forms and conspiracy theories and that sort of junk. However, he was very afraid of actually going to the places that were described as the DMT hyperspace. As much as he enjoyed reading and understanding the drug, he would not do it. He wasn't ready. After a long discussion on what I had experienced, I was actually convinced that I was contacted with a very intelligent alien life form through the DMT. I had this crazy theory, like the aliens knew I had DMT and were trying to contact me, show me things while I could see them when my third eye was activated. Crazy, right? Anyways, my friend said I should try it again tonight and see if I have a similar experience. I concluded to myself that I would in fact try it once again later that night. I did it in the same place, around the same time, with the same dose. This is my story of going beyond hyperspace, time, and life itself. Everything around me instantly began to change. It was so alien, so unbelievable. I could see energy coming up my body, telepathically communicating all through in and throughout my body. Energy was shifting around me. Life as I know it, showing me that there is so much more than the simple physical realm of fantasy that I live in. I was being told instantly that aliens were in fact very real, and I knew they were now. I knew that if this is happening right now, right here, then there is no way they are not real. It was so unexplainable, so intense, so real. What I was experiencing right now was nothing I have ever heard throughout readings on the internet or books about the drug. I was out of control. Life was out of control. I was in the middle of another transportation, except it was so much more intense. right before my eyes, I had left this physical realm. I was able to look down and see once again my bones twisting and turning everywhere. My hair was growing again. I look up to scream, but it was too late. My head is thrown back as my spirit or brain is transformed into pure energy. Now, I am flowing through a network of systems, and I am one with the aliens. I am what they are. I am super intelligent. I know all the secrets of the world. Bam. Just like that, constant super intelligent information is transmitted into my brain by the aliens, who are energy like me. It all comes to me. The ultimate understanding. Rhythms of the human conspiracy about life's deepest concepts can be broken into by the journey to an intergalactic hyperspace of universes. Entering into these worlds will produce realities of self-inflicted fantasies. However, they are real. Your body is in place, while your spirit is trying to leave and show you extraordinary things. Your mind will learn what your spirit has learned, and in the end, your ultimate individuality will grow as a force here on the planet Earth. Noisy sensations of parallel feelings towards distinction, triumph, and immortality, like realities, slam our brains from every single, most exact dimensional layers, according to the most advanced properties of physics. They're playing with me, laughing at me, showing me their world, explaining the many secrets of alien life, and the many secrets of the physical realm I'd been living on. I knew everything. I knew that I knew it was right. I still think it might be right. I am one with everyone. I am the universe. I can produce 1,000,000 words into actuality at once. And so can they. It was the most beautiful world of colours and life. Fairies and aliens, ghosts and angels. It was everything. It was the spiritual realm of existence. And they loved me so much. They told me so much. And they told me that I could come back whenever I wanted, and to bring as many friends as possible, because they will show them everything as well. When I started to finally come back to reality, I wasn't afraid about anything anymore. I didn't question life, and this is because I actually believed that I was just taught all of the secrets of the world. Right before I left the spiritual world, I was enhanced with a supercharge of energy, allowing me to have the most intense mind expansion anyone has ever imagined. I could create and do anything in my mind, and I could see it, like it was happening. I had a rush of euphoria, more intense than the greatest LSD and mushroom euphoria put together by 1,000,000. I still was in touch with aliens, but I could not see them. Not physically, that is. This feeling lasted, for at the least, an additional 40 to 50 minutes after the heaven I had just left. I smiled, looking down at a text from a roommate, who'd been staying at his girlfriend's that week. Well, what happened, man? How did it go? Did you see the aliens again? I didn't even respond. I didn't have to. Because I knew that the physical realm was nothing more than an illusion. I knew that the spiritual realm, the infinite realm, was and would always be the more beautiful and more intelligent realm to exist in. I knew this because the aliens knew this. I was filled with the greatest feeling I have ever felt. It was the greatest experience I had ever experienced. It was better than anything real. Better than anything here. I then knew to myself that I had become addicted. Physically, no, but my mental mysticism and desire was so intensely obsessed about what was going on. For the remainder of the night, I listened to some trance techno for a few hours, and then I fell asleep like a baby. And I recall having some very intense dreams, with memories of seeing the aliens while I was asleep. When I awoke, my roommate had come back and was so curious, so concerned about what had happened. "Dude, what the hell happened last night?" I remembered his exact words as being. "Look at this crazy text you'd sent me." I looked at his phone and smiled, even though I should have been freaked out. It was a text from me that said, "We have shown your friend everything he needs to know. We want you too." It goes without saying that I did not remember texting that at all. My friend was starting to worry and kind of freak out. "What is going on, man? Is this really happening? Are these things really happening to you, or are you messing with me?" I looked down, now confused once again. Is this even real? Do I even know what real is anymore? What is really happening to me? I think I'm either actually discovering the secrets of the world, or slowly slipping into insanity. Oh my. That night, I sat there, looking at it. Looking at the DMT loaded in the pipe, ready to go. What should I do? I thought. I have to get back to where I was. They told me I could go back whenever I wanted. It was decided. I did it in the same place, around the same time, with the same dose. Energy began to flow like before. Alien telepathic communications were strong. I began to look up and close my eyes, only to be shot back into that mystical alien spaceship that I was in before the hyperspace heaven. I was on one of those machines that carry stuff in like a factory, being rolled through some kind of processor data analyzer machine, seeing the aliens all around me, looking down upon me, angrily. They were so intimidating, angry, upset, mad at me, but I honestly didn't know why. I was no longer in the beautiful place they had taken me before this, and I was in a more physical realm, but in a different dimension. They were just looking at me, sucking all of the intelligence out of me that they had given me before, angry at me for some reason. I didn't know why. I didn't know what I did. I didn't understand. I was shot out of the spaceship quicker than normal, and I was back to some kind of reality, except my body was once again changing as I looked at it. My hands now were completely monkified, along with big hairy arms. I genuinely felt like I was actually a monkey, and I thought I'd begun to scream like a monkey. I felt lost. I felt like part of my brain was crazy, and I was no longer super intelligent at all. And I was also no more strong, intense euphoria like before either. What had happened? Why? No. Conclusion and final thoughts. After I was completely down, I began to really rethink reality and what has happened to me in the last week. Perhaps it was time for me to leave the substance alone for a while. I need a week or so to settle down, think about what has happened, try and figure out what was going on. I needed help, I thought. Not from a doctor though, I wasn't completely crazy yet. I'm still more or less in touch with my own reality, but I'm very well beginning to question reality like no other time in my life. I feel as though that I have broken through to another level of the DMT experience. That I have gone on to a level past DMT, made contact with the other side, like they had connected to me. The things that had been happening to me were nothing like a drug. Nothing like LSD, or anything like it, could ever do what this has done. Not even close. This substance was something else. A key to our chemical structure, a key to our DNA, the key to life itself. I thought that I'd been living in a science fiction horror movie, and I was quite possibly on the edge of going insane. I just really don't know what to think about all of this. Soulmate Symbol, a ketamine, MDMA, mushrooms, ephedra and nitrous oxide trip report, posted by Particle16 to Irwid.org, May 21st, 2007. New Year's Eve was coming on, and once again I was quite tired, exhausted, and had a headache that was buzzing through me. I had around 3 teaspoons of ephedra, drank it still quite warm, and proceeded to have a short nap. This lasted for about half an hour, and I felt fresher than I had throughout the whole day. 3 hours later, we arrived at our friend's place, and all proceeded to eat our small piles of magic mushrooms, a local coppertop species. Having issues eating the dry and mouldy tasting mushrooms on their own, we experimented with bits of popcorn and even mustard to make them come down easier. Not much was really eaten, and we had not eaten for around 6 hours prior. After about half an hour, the mushrooms hit, with a light discomfort and some indigestion. A light altered state was felt. Potentially our system still had a high build-up from the previous experience, with almost no closed-eye visuals at all. Open-eye visuals were also not present, but in the night, several trees had an added majesty and complexity added to them. A little euphoria was felt, and in general the experience felt more like a weak MDMA hit than the previous experiences with the same mushrooms. 1.5 hours after the mushrooms were taken, 1 ecstasy tablet was taken, which came on in about half an hour, just in time for New Year's. A great euphoria was felt, as New Year's hit and the fireworks were exploding. People could be heard in the houses nearby. A great feeling of togetherness was felt. Hugging friends was great, and we even indulged in a group hug, something unimaginable usually. Intimate moments and discussions with the girlfriend were also great. We were at a very high level of happiness and talked endlessly for a good hour. Our friends joined us on the large bed, and we all sat together and talked. There was definitely a vibe of fun and friendliness amongst us. No real come down was noted off either the mushrooms or the MDMA, as we still continued to have fun and talk together. But as it was getting late in the night, the party started separating a bit, and a few short casual bulbs of NOS were taken. Now, around 5 AM, we retired to the bedroom, and split a half gram of ketamine crystals. These were crushed into a fine powder, and 4 lines were produced, which were inhaled into each nostril. Unlike previous times, no nose burn was noted, and very little residue entered the back of the throat. I had enough time to walk the 15 steps from the kitchen to the bedroom, and lie down before the K hit. The room changed hues very quickly, and its size and dimensions quickly changed. Within a little while, I was on the way to the K-hole, and it began with a strong coming home and destruction of my own identity sort of feeling. I could feel my whole being torn apart into individual molecules of light, and my spirit moving inside of them. The spirit itself twisted back and forth momentarily, as I was rising far outside the room. It felt like a roller coaster going backwards and pulling me into space, and I saw the whole night sky and myself rising over the hills. I continued rising beyond the earth, I remember looking down and seeing my parents' house in the night. Soon, I was transported beyond planets and galaxies. Then the mind momentarily saw what I believed to have been God. It didn't see as much as just to be overwhelmed by a presence. An incredibly powerful, radiant swirling force that radiated goodness and warmth. Having come from a strong religious upbringing, I assumed it would be looking down at me unfavourably. But for some reason, the feeling that remained was this is the time you were meant to experience this. When I next found myself, I was in a purplish dark chamber, and my spirit twisted again. I went from absolute knowledge to retardation, where everything goes very slow and unfolds like a timeless fractal. It was a strange feeling that I've had on ketamine before, which I assume is the apex of the experience as you rebound back into reality. My whole being was being spliced back together in this chamber, and I was being put back together in small layers as bits of my own identity returned to me. The whole process seemed almost over, and I started moving through the chamber, which more and more felt like an interdimensional space station. There were a variety of sections to this space, and I felt the presence of my friends who were in the physical house nearby to me. I saw them all as spirits, and came upon the realization that what I was witnessing was the spiritual dimension of our existence. Continuing upon this journey, I found a soul marked with a symbol. I have seen this symbol, that I call the Soulmate Symbol, on my very first ketamine trip, and it's an impossibly abstract vision to describe. Essentially, it is a merging of sex, love, combination, eternity, and a million different positive feelings all merged into one. I know that I have seen this symbol as a child, and somehow associated it to a variety of feelings. To try and describe it, one needs to think of old Indian Kama Sutra paintings, where the man and woman are combined together, but neither really look like man or woman, only in an abstract sense, almost cartoonish but different. On my first ketamine journey, I travelled beyond my body to the place where my partner lives, and once again on this journey, I had found her. It was almost like this space station had a line or endless row of souls, and having seen the symbol, my own spirit attached to hers. We moved further through the ship to a larger, bluer chamber, where she finally recognised who it was that had found her. We were lying in bed at the time, and it could be that we were both coming out of our trip and conversing with each other, though I must say, I have felt a telepathic link to people nearby on other ketamine trips. We slowly returned back to the room, and I saw her materialise before me. I lay there, quite drained, and filled with thoughts for a while. The dose, or purity, or application of the ketamine must have been considerably more powerful this time, as I felt it last a lot longer, and have a stronger buzzing, reverbing effect on my body, as I went to see my friend who had spent most of his trip in the backyard. Me and my buddy talked briefly about current world events, and I then slept deeply upon my return to the bedroom.